How's it going, everyone, and welcome to the Mostly Peaceful Podcast, episode 2, on YouTube.com for now. The other episodes have officially been unlisted. You can send them to your friends and they'll be able to see them. You can find our previous episodes listed in the announcements board of our Discord channel, which you can find I'll stick it in the description of all of our episodes, so you can find it there at some point after this show.
Wait, you said they've become listed or unlisted? You
They
said
are,
unlisted.
they are listed now. They're public. Everybody can see
Right.
them. I was going to make a post on the Donald, but they have a no self-promotion rule, but it says spamming. So I wrote a mod and asked if it was okay before I post there.
Right.
So yeah, we have that. And yeah, episode 2's going. Some stuff happened. We are your favorite show hosts, Ara still.
And Volatile, and we're going to bring you our opinions, our wild and crudely educated opinions on it's 2020, so since a week has passed, we've had about 6 months of news on any other year. So we've got some topics for you today. We've got the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, which were a clown fiesta, and we've got the Hunter Biden hard drive leaks, which are also a clown fiesta. And yeah, those are the main things from the United States. Also, New Zealand had a general election, and we have a new government, same as the old government, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yep. So I guess we'll jump right into it. We'll start with the Amy Coney Barrett stuff, because this is the news that was expected this week. We were going to do a show on just this stuff because we expected it to be fun to make fun of, but more stuff kept piling on. And there's even more stuff that we're not talking about this week. So if you're wondering why we're not talking about the Oregon voter fraud stuff going on or the other stuff that happened this week, it's because there's just too much stuff to talk about. We'll get to it next time, maybe.
Time in the day. We already did one 7.5 hour episode, so
yeah. So the ACB hearings, in general, they're much tamer than I thought they would be, but they still provided a lot of quality comedy from the Democrats, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the tameness comes from the fact that the other than crazy Hirono, there's not really anybody in the in the Democrat Party who is either smooth-brained enough or reckless enough to actually try and pull this sort of crap on ACB that they tried to pull with Kavanaugh. Like any male Democrat, for instance, that tried to pull that type of crap on her would end up knowing that they had set themselves up to be dogpiled at a later date if they disagreed with the orthodoxy on anything as a misogynist.
Yeah, and
so most of them are just not going to want to involve themselves at all because they know their culture in that party is just set up that they are going to end up falling on their own sword at a later date.
The men were doubly stuck because the pre-canned narrative that was disseminated to all of the mainstream media and their allies in the internets and such was Trump v. Pence was all Pence mansplaining to Kamala.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a bit of a hard sell, especially to the public, if they then turn around and decide that, oh well, but it's okay to mansplain to this woman.
Yep. And in general, I thought she did pretty well. I can't think of any question she answered that was particularly eyebrow-raising. It was all in line with just trying to get through this hearing and not let them get her trapped into saying, what's your opinion on this case? And will you overturn case X? Usually Roe v. Wade or that gay marriage decision, etc.
No, the one that I heard brought up the most often was the Obamacare decision.
And Obamacare, yeah. And this was a running theme that we're not going to touch on when we go and quote these guys because it just got so repeated by everybody that the Democrats effectively only asked 3 questions of substance, and she gave the exact same answer for all of them that also all other nominees have given when asked, are you going to rule one way or another on a revision of case X?
Yeah, I mean, they can't answer that question. So I can only assume that it's just kabuki theater, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And in that vein, I think that was the real the real theme of this hearings is that nobody really intended to ask any actual questions,
Yeah.
at least on the Democrat side. Well, I mean, to be honest, nobody asked any real questions on the Republican side either because they were all softballs. But when I say they're all softballs, it would be more accurate to say is that they were all, reasonable questions as opposed to idiotic repetitions of previous idiotic questions.
Yeah. But the three questions she got asked more than anything are, what is your opinion on abortion and Roe v. Wade? What is your stance on LGBT quote unquote rights and the ruling that gave them the right to marry nationally? And what is your opinion on Obamacare? And this was repeated by every single Democrat took at least one of these, asked it to her, and she would give the same answer. I cannot give you a prediction on how I would rule on something without hearing a case argued in front of me by lawyers.
Yeah, the only thing I think in some that I found a little bit dubious about ACB's answers is I feel that she laid it on a little bit thick regarding her and her family's reactions to the George Floyd situation.
I agree. Now that you bring it
And
up, yeah.
that bothered me mainly because it was a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Because it's fair to say that virtually everybody had a knee-jerk reaction, but it did show a leap to judgment without assessing the facts squarely,
Mm-hmm.
which is not really what you want in a judge. So that was the only thing that I was dubious about, was that she transparently leapt to the exact same conclusion as the rest of the knee-jerkers in the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a huge blow against her, because it's more likely that she was reacting to her children's emotional reactions. And it looks like most of her children are sort of like teenagers.
Yeah.
So they're going to react in a similar way to what they see their peers at school reacting, and their parents will have to deal with that however is appropriate. So that's why I'm willing to let that one slide, even though I don't really like the opinion. Like it should be at this point pretty clear that whenever the media reports something outrageous, you should wait for the actual facts to come out rather than taking them at their word, because they have an agenda.
Yeah, and they're usually wrong if it's a highly controversial case, especially in the last few years. See Nick Sandman and i.e. the Covington kid, in his case.
And to be fair, any initial report like that, which is hot off the press, the first set of information that anybody's gotten on the topic, it's likely to be full of mistakes. So you shouldn't really, use that as an excuse to start setting policy, as seems to be so popular these days.
Yeah.
So
So
there's some kind of saying about difficult situations making bad legislation or something.
yeah,
But
and that's definitely the case here. And I too was disappointed with that answer. Now that you mention it, but I had forgotten about it because the Democrats were making such clowns of themselves during this particular hearing.
there are a lot of things, like, because that was an answer that so heavily involved her family. I take for granted that there's a lot of things that because I don't have children, I don't know what it's like for parents having to deal with their children, like how they would choose to do that, what additional information is at play there in those interactions. So
Which
yeah,
really
it's
brings forward the malicious nature of the narrative pushed as it was. Just because you're going to have people jump onto this that should not be jumping on to the conclusions they're making.
yeah. But generally speaking, she handled herself extremely well, and I feel like in a lot of ways these hearings only really exist to serve the people who are doing the questioning, because in this case, because the Supreme Court has been so politicized, their only interest is to ask her a question that she cannot answer if she's going to maintain standards. And it's very nasty, because if she gives the answer, it shows her unsuitability as a Supreme Court justice, but they are questioning her in order to get no response, which they are portraying as showing her unsuitability as a Supreme Court justice. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Yeah. And yeah. So anyway, um, the other highlights aside from the way their general behavior was, one person asked ACB if she could hold up. I forget if it was a Republican or Democrat who asked. Do you have any notes? Can you show us what's in front of you? And she pulled up a notepad that had nothing on it, page from Michael Knowles' book, and and showed it to everybody, and it was completely
The
blank.
letterhead of the Senate.
Yeah.
But
So so
yeah,
yeah.
a lot of people said that this was a good moment. It was a good, photogenic moment. And has been turned into all kinds of memes ever since.
As you can see
But
by our picture from the show, we have. She did not hold up the New York Post article that was blank.
yeah, but while it's a very memeable moment, it's not actually really significant of anything. Um, other than it shows that she has the adequate level of preparation to answer questions off the cuff.
Yeah, I mean, she
There
was.
have been people on the left side of the aisle who have tried to spin it as either her being arrogant or as her having contempt for the proceedings or as her not having thought ahead. But the objective of that little piece of political theatre, if I recall correctly, which I may not, was specifically to show that she did not need to have all of the ridiculous numbers of props and signboards and notes and research and that was required by the senators questioning her. And really what it does for the viewer is cement in everybody's mind that she is clearly the most intelligent person in the room, other than maybe Ted Cruz, who is probably the only person in that room who has any place assessing whether someone's suitable to work on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and he did a really, really good job. Like, I've been more and more of a fan of Cruz as time has gone on. And
You
since,
mean as his beard has grown in?
yeah, ever since he's gone from lion to lion, Lion, Ted, he's really, really grown on me. So, good old Ted.
I don't know what it is about the beard, but it seems to have helped.
Yep. I was a little worried right after the election because he was really salty that he lost, but he got over himself and he started working with Trump and got involved with Trump's team and has been legitimately part of the MAGA agenda the whole way through.
Yeah, and he didn't bend to the Never Trump crowd who have basically treated him as a pariah because he didn't join the Trump hate train.
If anything, I think Cruz not joining it and not joining their little hate train is what gave them so little power because he took all of his friends and was able to solidify a pro-Trump coalition in the Senate made up of and headed by Trump's main opponent at the time, the guy who by all rights should be the most angry that he took the nomination. But no, Cruz is totally in favor of everything Trump does now.
Realistically, I think that that's just because Cruz is too intelligent to fall for that sort of crap.
Yeah,
Like a lot of people, because he's got that the stereotypical Texan drawl. I feel like that makes people in America immediately underestimate him. I don't know if that's really true or not, but that's the impression I get.
yeah,
Is that Texan drawl automatically gets you written off as an intellect in the United States with the coastal types.
yeah. We those of us from the South, I tamper down my Southern accent quite a bit when I talk online, and it is because people would think I was flat retarded all the dang time if I kept running with it. So
But anyway, let's get into this rather than getting sidetracked by things Cruz does because that's not really what we're here to
we'll get into
discuss.
his break. Yeah, we'll get into his breakdown at the end of everything, because he gave a really good summary at the end, or near the end as we were winding down. So yeah, the first step. We'll just go down the list. We wrote them down, not in any particular order. Just we have first up is crazy Senator Hirono, the one from Hawaii, I think.
Yeah, Senator Mazie Hirono, who has been a perennial favourite when it comes to supplying just completely idiotic commentary. I can't remember the last time she opened her mouth and something reasonable came out, if in fact that has ever happened.
Yeah, no, she is notable in my mind as being the one that refused to disavow Antifa, and when they were at their peak violence during the riots, and actually ran away from as Cruz when he asked her to her face at a hearing.
Yeah, she's completely balmy. Like, and I don't think she's balmy in the radical activist way either. She's not like a member of the squad or anything like that. I think that she's just like a has-been old woman who still thinks that she's a youthful activist type, and she's not. She's just thick. Ultimately, I think she's thick. She's not intelligent.
Yeah, she she does not ever give me the impression of intelligence, and she does not ever source anything correctly, as we'll see with her second thing she did. But first, the first thing that made headlines with Hirono was she asked ACB, "Since you have become a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?"
I'm gonna say I was incredulous. I didn't think anybody would do it.
Like,
Like it's just it's so really that's your question.
you know, whether the left wants to acknowledge it or not, there is a difference between men and women. And the fact of the matter is, women are not predisposed to this kind of behavior, and it is an irrational question to ask a woman without evidence beforehand.
It's not unheard of. I mean, one of ACB's major critics is that woman who got fired. Well, she didn't get fired. She was a I can't remember. Was she was some high placed politician who it came out that she'd had an affair with one of her female staffers and was accused of sexual assault and a bunch of stuff,
Yeah,
and had a
naked pictures
like
of her brushing hair on the internet. Yeah,
yeah, like she's one of ACB's major critics. Thinks that she's been trying to sell that Handmaid's Tale meme about ACB, but
yeah.
so it's not unheard of because she did end up losing her career over allegations of sexual assault. But
But we also had the Kavanaugh hearings show that this is a really dumb thing to accuse somebody of if you ain't got proof.
not merely no proof. Like they did not merely not lack proof for Blasey Ford's accusations in the Kavanaugh case. In fact, everyone who was supposed to provide support showed up to denounce her.
Yeah, and
They brought the opposite of proof to the table. They practically refuted their own case.
I've heard. I was watching Ted Cruz's podcast, and he did point out a good point with Hirono. She does ask this like to literally everybody, regardless of who they are, because she's obsessed with it.
Did that exist pre Kavanaugh, or is that just her thing?
Yeah, I don't know if it existed pre Kavanaugh, but she, in all instances where Cruz has been there, he claimed that she always asks this question whenever the Judiciary Committee is grilling anybody.
Well, she is a wacko.
Yeah,
Like there's no question about that. She's not all there. Maybe it's something about being the senator for Hawaii and acting as though that makes you as important as everybody else. I don't know.
oh, yeah, your brain got fried from all the coconut milk or something. But yeah, that was not the sticking thing from Hirono's hearing or questioning during the hearing. It was instead her calling out ACB because when ACB referred to LGBT people, she said sexual preference.
Which
And
is, of course, a turn of phrase that has been used by everybody on both sides of the aisle and throughout society since goodness only knows when.
well, yep, and Hirono decided this was a known quantity word that was offensive to the alphabet people. And
Because it implies that they merely prefer something and could change themselves if they wanted.
which is on its face not true. Preference does not mean you are in control of it. I do not control that I like vanilla ice cream better than chocolate. It just is a thing. I do not prefer. I do not control that I like mushrooms on pizza more than anything else for a topping. Like,
You do?
yeah, mushrooms are my favorite topping.
It's not very common.
But yeah, it's just something that's always been there. I didn't decide, mushrooms will be my favorite. It's no, I tasted a pizza with mushrooms on. I'm like, oh no, that's my favorite. I like the way that tastes best.
That's probably actually a nuisance because most pizza places don't have a they don't have the major varieties of pizza with mushrooms by default. You always have to add them.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I didn't choose that or the ice cream example. So the idea of preference implying that it's something they can change is total bunk.
But regardless of that, that sort of undermines their basic theory, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can decide to change your gender, which all of these people agree, right, that you can change your gender,
Yeah.
and so let's say your sexual preference is heterosexual, and then you decide to change your gender, doesn't that mean that your sexual preference is ostensibly shifted?
Yeah. And
You're no longer, if you can really go from if you're a homosexual man and you just decide you're going to become a woman, are you really still a homosexual or are you not a homosexual when you change
the,
your
they
gender?
they will tell you, oh, they get a reclassification once they become trans, and that changes the dynamic entirely, and they are now they were always a heterosexual woman, and that their previous sexual preference didn't matter. So that's the way they'll play it. And they also will, with when it comes to sexuality with people in the left's description of them, they will interchangeably say that it is both something you're born with and cannot change, or that it is a choice and these people need to be respected for their choice, depending on what is more useful at the time. I've seen both arguments thrown around pretty close to in equal amounts, and both, of course, will say there's whatever they're arguing at the time is settled science.
As opposed to there not actually having ever been any kind of science behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that by itself would just be more of Maisie Hirono's normal barking mad idiocy that happens every time she opens her fat gob. But
But it's 2020.
apparently, yeah, it's 2020, it's clown world, so people need to spring to her defense. And who should spring to her defense but Merriam-Webster, the dictionary publishers?
Yeah, so Webster in the US is probably the most cited dictionary that I've seen out there.
It's just because you hate Oxford.
Yeah, the US has a inclination towards citing Webster's over Oxford. And Webster's decided to change their definition of preference to highlight that it is actually an offensive term to LGBT people.
Because they are woke
Yeah.
and they need everyone to know it. Because that's just how you do in this day and age.
And if you do not believe me, I will pull it up and I will try to find it while we keep talking. You keep talking.
So, yeah, this is not the first time that Merriam-Webster has done something like this. I can't remember what the previous occasion actually was, to be quite blunt with you. But I'm like about 99% certain that they have been responsible for this sort of, oh, let's change the definition after the fact type of thing in the past. I think that it was something like they decided to alter the definition of racism to incorporate the new arbitrary critical theory power plus prejudice type definition, as
Yeah.
opposed to one that actually involves a material belief in racial superiority or whatever.
So you can see over here, I have preference pulled up on Merriam-Webster. And if we scroll down, we have under their usage of preference section, the term preference is used to refer to sexual orientation is widely considered offensive and in its implied suggestion that a person can choose who they are sexually or romantically attracted to.
Widely by Maisie Hirono and no one else.
Yeah.
Except for the editorial staff at Merriam-Webster.
And of
But
course, if
this is what Wikipedia was made famous referring to this type of expression as weasel words.
Yeah.
Because you're just asserting that it's widely believed, widely like this, definitely widely.
So yeah. And if you are so inclined, although we did not go digging for them before this show, you can go out there and quite easily find plenty of examples on Twitter of Democrats using the word sexual preference, literally up until the minute that Hirono said it was a bad thing to do.
This is one of those situations where they're going to end up entrapping themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They've created so many novel and nonsensical rules around conduct that there's no way they're going to be able to keep track of them all.
Yeah, this is why you don't play this game with them, folks.
Yeah, so you just don't acknowledge them. The meaning of the term preference has not changed. It has not changed because people have not changed the way they used it, and Webster can say whatever they want.
Yeah, in our colloquial language, it will take many years of the Democrats running with this narrative to get people to change the word preference.
Or, a couple of administrations of putting everybody who says it in jail.
Yeah,
which is the way that the left has traditionally handled situations like this, and the way that my prime minister intends to handle this situation as well.
Yeah. Oh, Jacinda. All right. So next up, we have Kamala Harris.
This woman, I am astonished at how staggeringly unlikable she is. Like, I thought that Hillary Clinton pretty much took the cake on that one. But I think Kamala is actually worse because Hillary at least expressed a sort of cunning evil, as opposed to Kamala Harris, who is just sort of, shallow two-bit thuggish idiocy.
Yeah.
She is also not intelligent. I mean, that's been the overwhelming impression that I've gotten out of all of the Democrats that have questioned ACB, is that they are just not clever enough to attempt what they are attempting to do.
And of all of them, Kamala Harris is touted as being a prosecutor for one of the districts in California, I think. And so she should have the legal oomph and knowledge to be able to actually challenge her. And we'll get to what she tried in a second. But the first thing she did was give a giant campaign speech where she didn't even ask any questions.
She did ask questions, but they were always leading questions. Like, she would tell an extremely long and extremely boring story about some person who had a pre-existing condition and had expensive medication, and then she would ask ACB, are you going to make this person die? Like that. She was almost that blunt with it. And she just repeated this pattern over and over and over again. Those were the types of questions she asked. They were not real questions. They were part of her campaign speech. That's the only purpose they served. It was a campaign speech, transparently, so everybody watching could tell. I don't know if she asked any substantive questions in the second half of her extremely lengthy speech, because I really glazed over after the first 15 minutes or so of her burbling,
Yeah.
because it was just insufferable political flim-flam.
Yeah.
There was no substance to it whatsoever. She was not there to assess suitability for the Supreme Court of ACB. That was not her reason for being there. Her reason to be there was to fill her time with self-aggrandizing bullcrap.
Yeah. And then during the second part, there was an exchange that I wrote down and dug up the quotes from because it was so transparently stupid on Kamala's part to even attempt this. And I'm flabbergasted she tried it, and she gets BTFO'd for it. ACB just totally smacks her down at the end of this, but she asks ACB a series of questions. Do you accept that COVID-19 is infectious? ACB responds, an obvious fact, yes. She then immediately asks, do you accept that smoking causes cancer? And ACB goes on to note that each pack of cigarettes includes a warning from the Surgeon General advising of the dangers of smoking. Clearly, at this point, ACB has caught on to the game. And then she goes, do you believe that climate change is happening and is threatening the air that we breathe and the water we drink? Barrett then replies that the previous questions were completely uncontroversial, but Harris was trying to elicit an opinion from her on a very contentious matter of public debate in regards to the climate change narrative. And furthermore, this wasn't in the article I took the quotes from, she tells her that she is trying to bait her into saying that one of the cases she may or may not rule on she'll have the outcome predisposed in her head based on her personal beliefs, and she's not going to do that.
Yeah, I don't. This is very, very frustrating to me. Like, and I've talked about this on the main show, as inappropriate as that might be, a number of times. Is that I am a scientist. That's what I do as a profession every day. So I know what these games are like, and I know how much bullcrap infests the system that is called science by the people that stand outside it, as well as the bullcrap that infests the system inside. And honestly, these types of questions, they just infuriate me, because they assume that science is directed at obtaining the truth, when there is no way to proceed from science to truth. Truth is purely metaphysical. Science is just an empirical data collection exercise, and you can build models using the data that you collect. The idea that you should take any given scientific conclusion as an article of faith is nonsensical. It really is. And you've got all these people who just, they don't understand science on a fundamental level. They think things like, oh well, I mean, the law of gravitation is true. Law of gravitation is not true. The law of gravitation is one model about gravitation, which I might add is now considered to be incorrect and redundant. It's still useful from time to time when you're performing crude calculation, because it's a good model for a first approximation. But it's not true. Science can't obtain truth. Science can simply create models that have more or less predictive power than other models. All
Yeah.
science is assessed on the basis of its predictive power. Some things are not science, they are prognostication. Climate science is one of those things. They have never produced a model with sufficient predictive power to be called a reasonable theory. Epidemiology is another one of those prognostication arts. They never produce a model with sufficient predictive power to anticipate what will happen in any given case. See 2 million deaths in the US by now.
Yes.
When you've got what, 1,000? Something like that?
It's there. When you cull out all the number inflating, yeah, it's probably closer to 1,000.
These people do not understand period end. They just don't grasp how science works.
Yeah.
And it's not even, I don't think it's a matter of contentious public debate, because I don't think the public can decide whether or not climate change is anthropogenic or not. What does it matter what the people think about it to the reality of the situation?
Yeah.
The objective of the civil power should be to deal with the situation they see in front of them as best they can. It doesn't matter what people feel about it. It doesn't matter, it should not matter which particular faction in a scientific discussion has the better lobbyists. Ultimately, and this is the traditional right wing conservative view of it, conservation is the environmental policy that the right adopts,
Yeah.
not environmentalism. Environmentalism is environment worship. It's basically Earth goddess worship in a different dress. But
And
there's no reason why you can't stop dumping waste into the rivers, and there's no reason why you can't stop pumping waste into the atmosphere. All of the other stuff doesn't matter. It will all follow from, less despoiling of the environment. And that looking at end goals that the right prefers to do rather than the virtue signaling in the moment is what actually accomplishes ends. So if you have several generations of pumping smog into the atmosphere due to coal burning, what that enables you to do is move to nuclear power the next generation.
yeah, and more to the point, no Democrat ever addresses this way of tackling climate change, regardless of whether it's as bad as the Democrats claim it is or whether it's as influenced by humans as the Democrats claim it is. They completely neglect that humans are adaptable creatures and we can figure things out. And if it does get that bad, we will still find a way to
But
survive.
that's because the environment isn't the actual concern. The religious trappings of pretending to be concerned for the environment is. Like I said, they don't understand science and they don't understand any of the corollaries to it either. But what they do understand is power. And what they do understand is that if you can get people scared enough, they will hand you the reins of economic power.
Yeah,
And that's the objective, ultimately. The climate change question is not one of science, it's one of economics.
and yeah,
Ultimately, it's one of economics. Who is going to be the person who dictates economics? Is it going to be centrally planned because they've got you scared into submission, or is it going to be market forces and then we will adapt with the situation?
yeah. So so this question did come up a lot in the hearings as well, or not question, but more prognosticating about the environment, and but it didn't really get anywhere worth quoting a question on it that I put down. So, but it's always obnoxious when they try it. And Camel Hair tried it, and it was clear that they're trying to ding Barrett on her response to Kamala's for this one because she said it's not it's still a very contentious matter of public debate. And that,
I think that the best answer to this question, like despite its clumsiness, Trump gave the best answer in the first debate. The answer is you need to have good environmental management, you need to have clean air, you need to have clean water, you need to let forests do natural burns when necessary, stop interfering with the economy.
yeah, and that is unfortunately a position that I think ACB would get burned for. It would see her as taking too political of a side, even though most of those things are not very controversial. They
Yeah, and it's appropriate for her to respond to the way that she did, because it is something that is going to end up being a political matter because it's already a political matter. So she has to treat it as such. And since politics to the Democrats seems to mean pass as much legislation as possible from the bench, it's appropriate for her to act this way, because if anybody is going to turn it into a court case, it's going to be the Democrats.
Yeah. When I
And
first
also, it could still turn out ultimately, if there's too much swampiness left in the EPA, that it could be political on the other side as well, in that they might transgress on someone's rights in the name of the environment, because that's what the EPA often has done in the past, if you ask me.
yeah. But we've been spending a lot of time on Kamala, so we should probably move on to the next one. And
Let's move
this
on.
this one is one that you paid more attention to than I did. You wrote the notes for Feinstein, so why don't you go and take it away?
So Feinstein is the woman who uh, was responsible for the famous "the dogma lives loudly within you" comment to ACB herself at her Seventh Circuit appointment hearing. I don't understand this whole court circuit thing. I've never really grasped how it functions, but at any rate, ACB was already appointed to a high court
Yeah.
way back in 2017, which seems like a decade ago now. Um, and at this hearing, they basically were trying to turn it into a religious test, and uh, the orthodox beliefs of Catholicism held by ACB uh, were called into question as being of higher authority to her than the law. But I mean, for any Christian, that's going to be the case, that the moral law exceeds the civil law in terms of ultimate importance. But because the United States is at its core a Christian country, the civil law was written with a view towards the moral law to begin with anyway. So there's not actually a real conflict there 99.999% of the time.
Yeah.
Although, issues have been introduced over the course of time where that is in fact the case. But that's not a question here. This is a question of allegiance. This is the exact same thinking that caused um, the rampant anti-Catholicism of days gone by in the United States. United States had a very, very bad problem with anti-Catholicism once upon a time. It
Yeah.
was a severe issue. The KKK were famous anti-Catholics. A lot of people think of them as just, oh well, they hate black people, but in reality, black people were just on their list of people that they hated. They hated a lot of people.
Yeah.
Foremost among them, aside from blacks, were Jews and Catholics. And the criticism against Catholics, and this is the one that got them killed in so many countries, is their loyalty to the Catholic Church over the civil power, and what people feel about that. And in this particular situation, basically Feinstein was trotting out the classic old anti-Catholic saw of your allegiances to Catholicism, you would be a traitor to the United States if you were given the power to do so. So this has not played well for Feinstein in the time since. She has gotten a reputation, particularly on the right and with a lot of people in the center, the more libertarian-minded people who sit in the center, as being that person who tried to impose a religious test on court appointment, that's a big no-no in the Constitution, from what I've heard.
Yeah. You can't do
Um,
that. The country was founded ostensibly to prevent that from happening ever again. That's why the people got on the Mayflower and said, let's go to this big giant landmass over there where they can't suppress us for our religious beliefs.
So this time around, Feinstein started out with an attempt to try and put some distance between her and that particular foible. So she takes a fairly banal and standard tack of attempting to get her opinion on Roe v. Wade, and ultimately all she ends up doing in this segment of questioning is, retreading the same ground that every single one of her questioners ends up treading, because this is all they care about, which is to try and get her to re-rule on Roe v. Wade and to relitigate over Scalia's opinion on the matter, because Scalia was famously opposed to, emanations and penumbras. But it's not her place to give that opinion. It's not her place to provide an advance ruling on this, so she just refused to do so
Yeah.
over and over and over.
And she did this with a lot of other Democrat senators too that insisted on doing. What's your opinion on Roe v. Wade? What's your opinion on Plessy v. Ferguson or something? And she's like, what if it comes up for review? What will you rule then? She can't comment on that. She hasn't heard the
It hasn't
arguments
taken
yet.
place yet. This is she's asked to make predictions in the future of events that have not happened, and there is not really any way to for her, even if she wanted to, she still couldn't do it because she hasn't been given that case to analyze. And it's really to me it speaks of the unhealthy idolization of persons that the Democrats tend to engage in, that they think that, oh well, what really matters is her opinion on Scalia, and is she going to try and be Scalia? Because it's just not how a good judge would operate.
Yeah, and
Scalia has his opinions, and he provided his reasoning for them. And a lot of people who are very conservative have very much disagreed with Scalia's opinions on a number of things, most famous being flag burning. But like, I'm an authoritarian, I wouldn't allow flag burning. The punishment for flag burning would be loss of citizenship and deportation to some hellhole in Africa. But the this is just not something that you're supposed to do at this hearing, and all of these Democrats know it. They already know it. They are trying to trick her into giving a ruling so that they can use that practice against her. That's the point. At
yep,
any rate, Feinstein does this tactic, which every other one of her questioners also does. Except I don't know if that crazy wacko with the conspiracy theory did it, because he seemed to have his head so far up in the clouds in his own world that he might not have known to. But in spite of this, it, Feinstein kept it pretty banal. She didn't do anything too crazy, and she actually did compliment ACB on her maintaining such a good work-life balance, that she could maintain such a large family and have so many children and take care of them properly despite the busyness of her career and so on and so forth. She seemed pretty impressed with that, and I've heard that generally speaking, Feinstein gave a disproportionately impressed impression relative to what you would normally expect from a Democrat after doing her questioning. This did not go down well for Feinstein either, in that she was savaged by her contemporaries and Democrat strategists and the press, obviously, because the press are just Democrats, all of them. Uh, she was absolutely savaged over giving her softballs and not being fit for this process. And there were people who were agitating to have her step out of the process because they believed that she was too over the hill and not capable of being the hard hitter she needed to be to do her job. And so, you know, she can't win. She basically met the end in that sense that every leftist eventually will, which is to be shot by your compatriots. Um, though it did come out after the fact that she had been caught on a hot mic complaining about ACB's Catholicism and her pro-life stance as being basically a character flaw of hers, and that, oh well, this is sort of this ineradicable defect type of thinking on her character. Which, I mean, I think that it's repugnant that she still thinks after all this time that the operative thing should be a religious test. And this has been borne out by a lot of talking heads in Democrat circles, that they really do think there should be a religious test on the court, because there have been so many Catholics on the court, particularly. They
yeah.
think that there should be a religious test for serving on the Supreme Court, and that only atheists should be permitted to serve.
And I will say, despite us not working together very well in the past, and especially in the U.S. in the last 30 years, the Catholics and the Southern Baptists, especially in the U.S., have come together very strongly to make sure that people don't forget there's a moral argument against abortion that the left is trying to sweep under the rug and make not a thing.
Yeah,
And
that's why they've got all of this rhetoric around a woman's right to choose, as though there's no other person involved.
yeah, well, there won't be for long if they get their way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just how they operate. But yeah, it's this is something that a drum that they're going to beat until kingdom come, quite literally, because that's just how they operate. That is the cult of death that they're a part of. That's why all of the same people who favor abortion are the same people who favor euthanasia and all these other things. They're all the same people who are in favor of you know children changing their gender. There's these sort of this bizarre behavior, bizarre self-destructive behavior percolates through their worldview, and that's why you get all of these things are coincident with each other.
Hmm.
That's why the situation becomes so polarized, is because coherent there is a coherent ethic associated with the pro-life position. They have their reasoning. Their reasoning was laid down long ago. The first prohibitions against abortion are in the Old Testament. That's actually what the word usually used to describe witches in the Old Testament means. It means a person who sold abortifacients.
Yeah.
And in Christian writings, the Didache prescribes abortion, and that was written in AD 70. It's the first church document, and banning abortion was one of its top priorities because it's something that, contrary to popular belief, has always been done, and nobody has ever considered it healthcare until now. But yeah, so that was Feinstein. She's the same old bat she always was, except now she's committed a sin that her compatriots won't forgive her for, and I expect her to fade from the scene before too long as a result.
She is a Democrat of high enough standing before that she may be able to weather it, but as especially with the news cycle exploding this week so much that it may have just gotten completely forgotten immediately. So she could very well still stick around just fine, but yeah,
It could be, but I mean that doesn't take much for you to end up sacrificed to the mob if you're a Democrat.
yeah. So next, we have Spartacus himself, Cory Booker.
Oh, I can't believe he takes himself seriously. But he's another one that just seems to live in his own world. Like in his world, that was a really brave and noble thing he did, and not making him the butt of jokes from now until the rest of his history in political life.
Yeah, it's whenever I think of Cory Booker and somebody mentions his real name to me, I don't put a mental picture to him until somebody says Spartacus. And
Like I can never remember what he looks like. Period. Like when somebody says Cory Booker, I actually do imagine Berserker Spartacus from Apocrypha just grinning.
I mean, it'd be pretty accurate. My oppression. But yeah,
That's what I think about. That's how I think of him.
so he pulled two moments that are worth mentioning. The first is he asks ACB in the longest winded way, "You condemn white supremacy, correct?" To which ACB responds with a simple yes. And then Spartacus continues, "Thank you. I'm glad to see that you said that. I wish our president would say that so resolutely and unequivocally as well."
This is another person he's not there to assess ACB's suitability. He's there to basically campaign for his next bid to become the president.
So yeah, they need the white supremacy boogeyman to be addressed at all times and disavowed constantly by the right, despite the fact that I don't know anybody that can name a prominent white supremacist that isn't Richard Spencer in the U.S.
Well, most of them are dead.
Yeah,
Like there's that guy, what's his name, Bird, the guy that Biden gave the eulogy at his funeral. Like
yeah,
that's the last major one that I can remember.
yeah. Like it's not a pervasive belief system, and you got all kinds of one-off beliefs that have wackadoodles. This is not the
Yeah.
most
I don't
relevant
I don't
threat.
think that like white supremacy is not even a strange belief. Like it's just another that it's not different from what like the black Hebrew Israelites believe and what the Black Panthers believe. Like it's not different, it's not special. It's just another silly ideology that there is some group of people who you can refer to as white, and they've got some kind of genetic, moral, or spiritual superiority over people who have more melanin in their skin or a different racial extraction or whatever. This is another silly belief. People hold a lot of silly beliefs, like that if they, make offerings to the climate gods, the sun monster will stop trying to burn you to death.
Yeah, and it just it drives me nuts that white supremacy is constantly brought up as a boogeyman, but it also drives me nuts that the Democrats make the Republicans play this game. You disavow white supremacy, right? Oh, okay, okay. And then the next day, you disavow white supremacy, right? The next day, you disavow white supremacy, right? And they'll do this over and over and over again. And I think Trump has said it like some 70 something times. And they still pretend he hasn't disavowed white supremacists. It's so stupid. We shouldn't play the disavow game to begin with, I don't think. It's really stupid having to go through every individual and assume the reporter is giving you the facts straight and knows everything there is to know about this person and the nuances of their beliefs, and that you can disavow them safely with that knowledge. That's totally stupid. It makes no sense. So it just bugs me whenever I see a Democrat play the "Do you disavow" game. And I get that we're forced to at this point because it's expected, but I really wish some Republicans would grow a spine and just tell these people to jump off a cliff.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that they're scared to because Trump does do that, and it never plays well for him.
Yeah,
Like because the media then jumps on it.
yeah, he tried to initially, but it was just not working out for him. So, but we need every Republican to work together and telling people to jump off a bridge when they're asked this.
You can't ever disavow anything enough to have disavowed it. It's as simple as that. The only alternative course of action that you could undertake would be to play it back with them.
Yeah,
Like you need to turn that back around on them.
yeah. Some Republicans have had success doing this. I forget who it was. So they were asked if they disavow white supremacy, and they go, "Well, I will if you disavow Antifa." The Republican, the Democrat commentator just was like, "What? Wait, I can't do that." It was so funny. I'll have to look up that video.
Can you? That's the thing. They know that it's an effective stick to beat their opponents with, and they'll use it. Why wouldn't they? The classic Democrat saying is that there are no bad methods, only bad targets, which ultimately means that anything is fair game for them. Anything is fair game. They don't care what they have to do. They want power, and they'll do what is necessary to get it.
Yeah, and so Republicans need to get much better at catching that stick they're using to beat them with and yanking it out of their hands and beating them back with it. I think that will be the best course of dealing with this, but it will take a long time before that becomes a standard operating procedure for dealing with the disavow problem. Next, we have his other statement. He brought up the Notre Dame letter. Now, we didn't mention this at first because it's really dumb, but Cory Booker brought up a letter written by 80 quote unquote peers from Notre Dame of Amy Coney Barrett's that were asking her to please refuse the nomination and not go through this hearing and don't get confirmed. I couldn't find her quoted response to it, but it was pretty good from memory when I was watching it live. And she basically told him, like, lol, no. And
well, I don't understand why anybody would expect her to care about that.
And then
it doesn't make sense to even suggest.
Yeah, she did a real good job hand waving it away, but I couldn't find the exact quote. And then what makes this really funny is all of those peers were later found out not a single one of them was a signatory from the department that ACB is a member of.
Were they all part of the women's studies department?
For all I know, they could have been. I didn't look at the exact departments that each member was a part of, but they were not part of ACB's. So they're not her peers.
It would be black studies, women's studies, sociology.
Yeah, all these activist type departments. So yeah, and that's Cory Booker. I just wanted to point out Spartacus because he's fun to make fun of to lighten the tone a bit.
He's just a clown. Like, he does, and he's one of those clowns who doesn't know that he's a clown.
Yeah, so it makes him a very funny clown because he doesn't know. Next, we have Miss Klobmentum herself, Klobuchar. You did this one a bit more.
My goodness, was this the worst thing that I've ever had to sit through? Like, at least Harris was only boring. I don't know if I'm happy or sad that this woman didn't get picked to be the nominee, because she's just so awful to listen to. She's got an unbelievably grating voice, and she thinks that she's good at presenting things in a sort of emotionally resonant way when she just ends up sounding like a hectoring witch. She has absolutely no self-awareness of what a thoroughly unappealing and horrible old woman she sounds like.
She sounds like a kindergarten teacher talking to her down to her class every time she opens her mouth, and it drives me up the wall.
It's just even the timbre of her voice is unpleasant. It's like she talks about everything like this, and you have to hear her go on like this at length because she's going to be questioning ACB for like 40 minutes of her droning on about stories from her childhood and about her mother helping them follow tracks of deer through the forest, and how following tracks of deer through the forest helps her discern that ACB is a bad candidate for the Supreme Court, and so on and so forth. My goodness, I felt like tearing my earballs out.
Yeah,
It was horrible.
I did not listen to this whole thing because this was just too painful.
It,
I
it's
turned her off after a while.
it was in fact deeply, deeply painful. Um, there's no other way to put it. It was just, oh my goodness, please stop, please stop, please stop, please stop questioning, please. Just no more, no more. Bring it to an end. I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. Just leave, leave. It was horrible. It was deeply horrible. So to the substance of what she was saying, the bulk of what she said was not new questions. It was the same old, same old. I want you to give a legal opinion on this thing which you are not supposed to give a legal opinion on. And then when you refuse to do so, I am going to talk at length about how this is proving that you are either an immoral person or an unsuitable person, because you aren't going to give the ruling on this case that I want. There was a lot of her questioning. She, despite the fact that I believe she's a lawyer by profession before becoming a senator, she seemed to just not understand the law or the statutes or the law reviews that she was trying to cite from, and ultimately just ended up looking like because she was presenting herself as a lawyer and trying to argue the law with ACB, she actually ended up making ACB look really good, because she provided the counterpoint of a completely retarded lawyer as an alternative point of view to ACB's actually quite a skilled lawyer. So yeah, it had to be very embarrassing for her, although I'm not 100% sure exactly why she thought that this was a good approach, because this seems like a dangerous tack to take in a lot of ways, because she's just really dumb. But she does have a very inflated opinion of herself. So she did try and take this on, and she was addressing at length the concept of a super precedent, which my limited legal understanding is that a super precedent is not a formal legal term. Like, a precedent is a thing, but a super precedent is an informal classification of precedents. And uh, a super precedent is basically a precedent that has been set in such that unanimity that there is really nobody left who cares to disagree with it. So a super precedent would be something like black people are allowed to vote. Like, nobody is seriously going to bring a case before the Supreme Court trying to prove that black people shouldn't be allowed to vote, like they once were not allowed to vote, and before that they had like what 2/3 of a person, something like that. I don't remember how it worked.
Yeah.
But it's a precedent that has been set such that there is no one in political or legislative arena who would ever try and raise a contrary opinion. It's just not something that's ever going to happen. That's a super precedent, informally determined. So Klobuchar doesn't understand this, and she thought that a super precedent was just a precedent you think is really important. So she tried to argue that ACB is inconsistent because she considers certain things to be super precedents and other things that Klobuchar thinks are important, like Roe v. Wade, to not be super precedents. And it's quite obvious by the definition, which is painstakingly explained both in the document that ACB had written and by ACB in the hearing, how a super precedent works and how that classification is contingent on there being no one in public life who would dare raise a contrary opinion, basically. And Klobuchar consistently said over and over again that there is some discrepancy in ACB's coherence in her legal appraisals, because she does not consider Roe v. Wade to be a super precedent. And
Yeah.
anybody there and anybody who knows what Roe v. Wade is will tell you that Roe v. Wade, KCV Planned Parenthood, none of these cases are non-controversial. And in fact, if they were non-controversial, ACB would not be being questioned about them, would she?
I think she said
Because
as much, didn't she?
it would, I believe she did, and it would never come up for discussion to begin with. So yeah, this is just, she's asinine. She's just the dumbest woman on earth. Despite being the dumbest woman on earth, she has an ego the size of a small planet, which is why she ran for president. And she let slip during the course of the hearings. At one point, she says that she thought that she would be in ACB's position as the one who was going to be appointed to the Supreme Court. And she also said that, well, she wishes she was queen because then she could just declare what people were going to do by edict and everyone would have to listen to her. Which is about as close to the opposite of the sort of person that you want on the Supreme Court as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
So I don't know what state she's a representative for, but whoever lives in that state, please vote her out. She's insane.
Yeah. I don't.
thought Americans didn't like people like that. I thought that was part of being American.
It's certainly part of being American, but being American is not currently on the Democrat agenda, as you may have noticed.
I suppose that's true. But anyway, that's Klobuchar, and I hope that I never have to hear her horrid, horrid voice again. But I'm sure she's going to run for president again next time round.
Yeah. Hopefully, she does not get any club momentum again. Oh boy. All right, and then let's end it on the Democrat side on a high note that is just funny. So I got a picture. It's not very big. I'll blow it up a little bit so y'all can see it a bit better. Of Mr. Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse. I don't know what state he's a senator for off the top of my head. But during this, and I know he's made some gaffes in the past, but I'm not even sure this guy asked a question. He just pulled out a bunch of charts and started going full Q-tard, the Democrat version of a Q-tard, with conspiracy charts and everything.
But this was not like, this is not an exaggeration, but he's like the meme image of the guy who's got like a wall covered in pieces of paper with bits of string joining them together.
Yeah.
And he's trying to explain his crazy theory about how lizardmen control the world. Like, that was the tier of this.
Yeah, so he's going through about how all these organizations that have given money to the Republicans, which there is no evidence that they actually have as far as I know, so I don't even know if he was telling the truth, and how that leads to some kind of conspiracy, and why this is bad and it's terrible forever. And his little poster boards fell down in the middle of his presentation at one point, and that was funny. And
like from what I've heard, the thing, I don't understand exactly how they reach the classification of dark money that these people are so fond of and have been fond of ever since that Hillary Clinton thing. Was it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
What was it called? They bring it up all the time as though it's
I think it's donations to a political campaign or political group that are not able to be sourced back to an individual or a company.
Yeah, it was Citizens United was the case, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
That is always brought up for this. When Citizens United, actually, if Citizens United had gone the other way, it would give the government the ability to censor any piece of writing, period.
Yeah.
So it's very important that Citizens United went the way it did, even though they try and frame it as, oh, well, Citizens United was a ruling that was basically bought by the Republicans in order to fund their campaigns. But according to, I think Senator Ted Cruz said this online at one point, amongst the things classified as dark money, the Democrats have roughly $3 per dollar of dark money that the Republicans have. Democrats have 3 of them.
Which is why the Democrats didn't run with this story when White House set them up for it, because it opens them up to being called not just hypocrites, but super hypocrites, because they get 3 times that. And
but also because White House looked like a lunatic up there.
Yeah, that too.
Like, if you were a Democrat strategist, you would want to put as much distance between you and that wacko as possible, because he was the stereotypical meme conspiracy theorist. It was not like he was. It was not like he was any kind of. I'm not trying to like construe him as in a caricatured way. I'm not trying to straw man him. No, he just looked crazy. like really crazy.
Yeah,
It was
it
it was very very strange thing to see.
it was pretty bad. And
Like I thought that people like that they typically don't have the sort of understanding of public image to get themselves elected, but then I guess people like Nipple Belt get
Nadler,
themselves elected
yeah,
somehow. Nadler. Like I don't know how you manage your image such that you can get elected when you look like him, but evidently there are people that do. But yeah, um, I did not understand White House's theory at all.
I didn't
I
either. I didn't have a clue where he was
I
going with
don't
this.
comprehend it. But he was what he had these boards up and he was wild-eyedly drawing stuff on them, drawing lines connecting things to other things, explaining how basically ACB was party to some grand conspiracy. And I don't think that there was a soul there other than White House who had any idea what White House was trying to say. And I'm not 100% convinced that White House did either.
I can flub my rhetoric sometimes and mess up my manner of speaking and my word choice pretty badly, but I don't ever lose track of the point I'm trying to get across quite as bad as it seemed like White House did. Like that dude just totally went off the reservation with his little presentation, and it was it in the case you mentioned earlier. By the way, Ted Cruz talks about it at length in his new book because he apparently clerked during that case. So if you want a bit more of what went into that, you can check that out.
I might actually check that out at some point because it is something that is just brought up constantly by the Democrats
Mm-hmm.
as some kind of attempt to suppress Democrat voters, which I don't even understand the connection between Citizens United and voter suppression, but whatever.
Yeah, you can. Cruz gives a really good breakdown of it in his book, and as well as several other popular Democrat cases. We're not
That was not a
total.
paid promotion.
Yeah, we're
That
not
was not a
total
paid
Cruz
promotion.
shills. I just generally thought the book did a good job and is a good source for figuring this stuff out.
I like the guy. I think Cruz would be easy to get along with.
Speaking of, he's the only Republican I wrote down any notes for because he totally dismantled these people.
There were a few other highlights from other Republicans. My favorite one is when oh what was the guy's name? Um Senator John Kennedy referred to Ibram X. Kendi as a butthead professor because Kendi had claimed that the reason why a white Catholic woman would adopt two children from what was it, Haiti?
Yeah, Haiti.
Would adopt two black children from Haiti is because she was trying to disguise her racism
Yeah,
by taking two children that needed families into her home and taking care of them for their entire lives. Like this is a bit of a stretch, man. I loathe Ibram X Kendi. He's like one of the major figures in the culture war. Basically, he pushes critical theory, and he's got a lot of people handing him money. He's a professional race grifter. Like I'd say he's probably one of the top 5 race grifters in the world,
yeah, he's a nut. Uh,
alongside like Al Sharpton and the woman who wrote that what was that? The recent book on white privilege
oh
and how
yeah,
all whites are racist. Well, I can't remember what it's called.
white
And
fragility or something like
right,
that.
right, the woman who wrote White Fragility, yeah, she's up there. Barack Obama is of course up there since he made his entire career on race grifting. Yeah, yeah, I loathe Kendi, and just to see him get offhandedly referred to as a butthead professor in a hearing by a sitting senator was amusing to me.
Yeah. So yeah, to wrap it up, I put Cruz at the end because even though we both are fans of as Cruz as he is now, he is still a legal mind, and I think anything that involves the law in the Senate right now, there isn't a mind better than Cruz.
Yeah, he's the his ultra left leaning teachers view him quite admittedly as the brightest mind that they have seen in their career, as far as law is concerned.
Yeah.
And
So
I hear that ACB is pretty close to his tier based on what her teachers have said. Maybe not quite all the way there, but yeah, I think Cruz would be a blessing to the Supreme Court if he was ever willing to go there. But I
yeah,
think he's probably still going to take another pot shot at the presidency in the future.
yeah. He's he feels he needs to be on the floor fighting because he doesn't see enough people doing it. And unfortunately, he has both the gift of being assertive enough to combat the crazy lefties on the Senate floor and have the judicial the qualifications to be nominated to the Supreme Court based on his legal history. So,
And he does have his uses fighting on the floor. Like he's able to bring people into the fold who would normally be too squishy. He seems
mhm,
to be quite good at persuading them to join the show, especially when there's a headliner like Trump around.
yeah,
But the he is right that there is a shortage of people like him. Otherwise, he wouldn't constantly be having to make common cause with Rand Paul, and he is like thoroughly opposed to Rand Paul on so many things. But there are no other allies.
yeah. And those two have become Fireforged friends at this point, and how much they have to work together to get the squishes on board with what needs doing. So,
Yeah, from what I haven't watched what Cruz said at the hearings, but I gather it was mainly shredding other people.
yeah, so social media has made this as a foreshadowing bit towards the end of the show. Social media has made the full speech incredibly difficult to find because he did such a thorough job of tearing these people apart. Um, he spoke right after White House, which was doubly funny because he looked flabbergasted that he just had to sit through that. That even caught him off guard and took him a couple minutes to orient his brain.
I think that is probably White House's Democratic colleagues weren't sure where to go after that performance.
Yeah. So he spent his whole minutes I think he had 30 minutes and some change calling out the Democrats BS. And he just tore them apart. And I wrote down three quotes in particular from his speech that stood out as being most important for his teardowns. In reference to Amy Coney Barrett, he put, "What speaks loudest is the dog that didn't bark. We've heard virtually not a single word about Judge Barrett." And that's a Sherlock Holmes reference for those who don't know. And then he said, Democrats and Republicans have fundamentally different visions of the Supreme Court. Democrat senators view the court as a super legislature as a policy-making body. This is true, and something that needed to be explicitly said, and nobody else had said it up to that point. And I'm glad he did.
No, it's a little bit. It always seemed a little bit strange to me that people are so leery about just coming right out and saying it when that is the crux of the problem. That is where the minds don't meet.
Yeah. So him putting that on full display for the American public was very, very good. And then he also brings up much of the argument this morning is about Obamacare. They want a promise from this nominee that she will work with Democrats to implement Democrat policy. Further elaborating on his point from before. So yeah, I in general thought his speech was really good. And if you want a good summary tearing down the Democrats without having to sit down and listen to the Democrats repeat themselves, if you can find it, Cruz's speech is really, really good for that.
Yeah, it's basically everybody else was dancing around the rock, and Ted Cruz just lifted up the rock, and all the bugs ran out.
Yeah, so I was very impressed with that. And we're at just about an hour and 15 minutes. Seems like a good point to transition to the Hunter Biden hard drive.
Right. So this was the other big story of the week that was, and it pretty much blew all the noise surrounding the ACB hearings out of the water,
Mm-hmm.
which is, in some sense that's a good thing, in some sense it's a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that the ACB hearings were total political pageantry. I don't know of any Republicans who are going to vote against her appointment, though there are probably some because there always are. And the Democrats don't respect her as a judge, and they have no intention of voting for her. Although I would be heartened if some of them were willing to cross the aisle and vote for her, because she's quite clearly good for the job.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't seem to be terribly concerned about that because, like Cruz said, their idea of what their job entails is just different.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
so this was the other big story, or at least I'm not quite sure whether it's bigger as a result of the way that the social media companies reacted to it, or whether it's been suppressed. I can't tell which was more effective, but I am leaning in the direction of Streisand effect.
yeah, as am I. The thing before we really dive into this thing, we should probably preface this by nobody has done a good job aggregating what the information that's out so far into an easily readable and sourced thing. Not even like the usual internet hives of scum and villainy. Uh,
Yeah, if I was trying to disseminate false information to create an air of suspicion on a topic, I probably would do it like this. That's the thing. That's why so many people are suspicious of this.
yeah, and I do think that is part of the reason that people are so hesitant to aggregate stuff, and it's understandable. Uh, but yeah, the other reason is we don't. It is hard to get this stuff verified when we have a government agency that is actively trying to suppress the story, as well as
Eh,
social media themselves trying to suppress the story.
Yeah, so the reality is that if you decided to do comprehensive aggregation, you would suddenly find that your website disappeared from the internet.
Yeah, and
Nobody would be able to find it on Google. Nobody would be able to tweet links to it. You would be over.
so yeah, a basic overview of what happened. Sometime in April 2019, a laptop is dropped off at a computer repair shop store where an employee, or maybe the owner, is John Paul McIsaac in, I think, Delaware. Uh, the customer who drops off the computer doesn't come to pick it up, doesn't pay for the repair work, and after 90 days, by the policy of that repair shop and the property ownership laws of Delaware, the repair shop is now the rightful owner of that computer. They open that computer up to see what they got, and they alert the authorities immediately because it's got a whole lot of incriminating stuff about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and a whole lot of embarrassing stuff about Hunter Biden. Federal law enforcement,
Yeah, embarrassing might not be the half of it of some of the rumors that are circulating are true.
yeah. So the whole hard drive has obviously not been leaked to the public yet. That would have been a way to make this verifiable very quickly. So I'm very upset that didn't happen. But this guy made a copy of it and then alerted the authorities and let the FBI come pick up the laptop. The FBI,
Unfortunately, one of the problems here is that since then, this guy has tried to make himself part of the story.
yeah, this individual hasn't gone and muddled things more, and I don't know if this is panic or if this is him just trying to play with it and make himself
Get his 15 minutes of fame.
yeah, it's hard to tell. It could be either. Um, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. All it works to accomplish is further confuse the narrative because he is not being clear in how when he's describing the story to everybody. But this is the most consistent. We're only putting consistent information down that we have that has not been refuted by any other of the people involved or people referenced.
Although, quite pointedly, very little of it has actually been denied in any way.
Yeah, that is in and of itself a telling thing. So the FBI comes down, picks it up in December of 2019. Now, you may remember that in 2019 there were impeachments going on in December, and that ran all the way until basically February. And this was incredibly relevant information that shows that Trump was right to strong arm the Ukrainians like he was because there are a bunch of corrupt monsters that favor Joe Biden if these emails are to be if these emails turn out to be true. So the FBI had this from December and sat on it. Well, come around to October 2020. Now, I have not seen a consistent report that either Giuliani or the Post received the copies of the hard drive next. But one of those two got it, and the New York Post ran a story that I unfortunately cannot show you like I did the other stuff earlier because it is so censored right now online that just showing an image of the title page, even an archive link, will get you banned.
Yeah.
So
Because it needs to be fact checked, apparently. Lots of these things need to be fact checked. Not things like so called tax returns that
yeah,
might have been illegally leaked to the press or whatever. No, those don't need to be fact checked, but this information definitely needs to be fact checked.
yeah. Trump's tax returns, Trump's call with the Ukrainian president, the Michael Flynn phone call, the Steele dossier, Donald Trump Jr.'s WikiLeaks emails, the Atlantic claims of Trump bad mouthing the military, the Atlantic story about a shooting that never happened in Chicago earlier this year during the riots, secretly recorded Trump audio with what's his nuts with Cohen, secret recordings of Melania Trump, enabling attacks on public officials and news figures all the time, and the Nicholas Saman stuff. None of that needed to be fact checked because all of that hurt Trump. But this could hurt Biden, so we need to squash this one clearly.
Definitely.
And
We can't let them get away with this.
And ho boy did they. As soon as the New York Post put out their first article of 3 right now, I think, that are direct big article reveals from this. Twitter and Facebook especially, but Twitter took it to 11, as well as YouTube and other social media and other media/social media outlets tried to crush this story with draconian levels of censorship. Twitter, in fact, tried to ban it so hard that their website died for 45 minutes because they screwed with the algorithm too hard, presumably.
Because everybody was talking about it. Because it became obvious very, very quickly that people who were trying to link to the New York Post article were simply not able to do so.
Yeah, and this further expanded into things like, well, we'll talk about social media suppression in individual instances and how bad it got a bit later. But they started suppressing high profile accounts, and then they started suppressing government agency accounts. You don't do that if you don't want to be called in.
If you decide that you're going to prevent the White House press secretary from releasing information on your platform, people are going to start to ask questions.
Yeah, and if you think we're joking, I have a picture of this one. So this is K-Mac's account notification that she posted after she got banned. So yeah, good old K-Mac got hit. And that's a good way to get the right really riled up about something, is to ban their pet Valkyrie. So that didn't go over well, and has caused even more trouble verifying any of this crap, because the simple fact that they're trying to squash it, A, makes information hard to search for, and B, makes it seem really likely that at least some of this stuff is very true. Because
that's not a meaningful way of determining whether something is true or not, but that's the impression it's going to leave on people, is that someone doesn't want us to talk about this for some reason.
Yeah.
And no matter whether or not it's true, the ultimate conclusion is still one of corruption.
Yeah. So that was really bad. So eventually Biden is forced to, some brave reporter at CBS actually asked him the question, and he dismissed it as just more right-wing smears, and that's what he expected of that reporter from CBS.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I've said in the past, there is this narrative on the left that all of the mainstream news media are on the side of the Republicans. And you saw just recently Nancy Pelosi try and pull this one.
Yeah.
When she absolutely lost her rag on CNN.
Yeah, she lost it with Wolf Blitzer when he was trying to throw her a life raft for the current COVID bill that's destroying her constituency. Like, her holding that up is hurting her in the election. And he tries to throw her a life raft and go, why don't you just work with the Republicans? No. She cannot take any kind of hostile questioning or even light touch hostile questioning of that Blitzer did, and totally loses her mind.
But yeah, that's the narrative, and I'm not sure whether or not they believe it, because they believe a lot of things that are just false to facts. Like they know it's not true, but they say it over and over again, and eventually they believe it along with everybody else. But yeah, this is certainly one of their core narratives, is that the media are all bought by the Republicans. Therefore, any reporter who asks a question that they don't like can be dismissed as a Republican shill.
Yeah, and so we have on Saturday, October 17th, we had Hunter Biden's business associate and partner in most of his business deals before he got arrested, Devin Archer, agree to release all emails from his Google account that supposedly detail Chinese influence peddling.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, this guy, if he's the guy I think I remember hearing about from earlier, he was kind of a scumbag and basically as dirty as can be. And going turncoat, it means that he sees the writing on the wall and wants to get out from under it as fast as possible.
Yeah. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that, as well as individuals all over the place that are saying, "Yeah, we've seen this stuff. I can verify it's true." So I guess we can start with the funny stuff. I didn't put the funny stuff pictures in the in the preload because I'm kind of scared to show them because we might get banned. But we have Joe Biden, or not Joe Biden. We have Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, uh, walking around with his shirt off, looking stoned out of his mind, falling asleep in bed with a meth pipe. It's a meth pipe, folks, not a crack not a crack pipe. Crack pipes have the outlet for the air on the bowl of the pipe. This does not, so it's a meth pipe.
Which is the most critical information for sure.
Yeah, but so he's fallen asleep with a meth pipe in his mouth, which, by the way, is fairly impressive. I just want to say, if
Don't
you
people normally take meth to avoid falling asleep?
yeah, like a part of smoking meth is you will never ever be tired. You can go for days without sleep if you're redosing every so often. Like that's fairly impressive. Now, what likely happened is he was coming down from a crash and couldn't redose fast enough and passed out with it in his mouth while he was looking for his meth. But that was really funny. You see his drawer that has what is conspicuously a penis pump inside of it.
I don't even want to think about it. There are a number of things that I just don't have any intention of spending mental energy on, and Hunter Biden's penis is one of them.
Yep. But these are the kind of funny pictures that came out that are honestly what we expected of Hunter Biden.
Yeah, this is all Hunter Biden 101. Everybody's known he's a degenerate scumbag for the longest time.
But yeah, these are the ones making the meme rounds, and not so much the actual emails because they are. There's two reasons these emails are hard to parse. Number one, some of them are very long or very wordy and use acronyms for people's names because that's a standard security procedure for these kind of big business.
It's not really security so much as plausible deniability.
Yeah,
Because that's not a person. Because that's not the person's name. It cannot be proven to be that person in a court of law.
yeah. So this is standard weaseling that corrupt businesses have done before. We've seen it in relation to like the Al Capone cases. Did very similar things in their letter correspondence with people when they handwrote letters. They even did this. So that's really sketchy. And the other thing is everybody is getting different exclusives. So tracking them all down becomes very difficult.
Yeah, I'm not. It's a very frustrating scenario to turn everything into a treasure hunt like this, but there are advantages to it. So that no one outlet for information getting shut up will stop the drip 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 of scandal.
Yeah, and I wonder if this many exclusives being disseminated to so many different outlets is a way of avoiding the New York Post problem that happened with Twitter immediately.
Yeah, because I mean they can't clamp down on everyone, and if they try, then it's going to become very very suspicious.
Yeah.
Not that anybody is under any illusions anymore. If this debacle has accomplished something, it's outing social media's political position to even people who are very very unaware.
But yeah, there are plenty of prominent personalities that have verified this stuff as real, so I'm inclined to believe some of them. Here I have Chanel's tweet pulled up. She goes, just saw for myself the behind the scenes look at the Hunter Biden hard drive, drugs, underage obsessions, power deals. Druggy Hunter makes Anthony Weiner's down under selfie addiction look normal. Hashtag Biden crime family has a lot of apologizing to do. So does big tech at OANN. So she's generally well respected amongst the right, even though OANN tends to be burned by the left pretty hard. So yeah. Where do we even start with this? We can start with the substance of them and then talk about the suppression that went on.
All right.
So the emails themselves, I can't put on the screen for fear of us getting tagged because showing the emails has got people banned when I went and did some looking before the show. But in broken English, we have several correspondence with people from Hunter and Burisma. Burisma referring to meeting Hunter's father, and Hunter referring to his father as my guy, uh, or pops, or other acronyms that in the context could only refer to Joe Biden. So it is clear that if assuming these are true, that Joe Biden is 100% a liar when he says he never had any dealings with his son's businesses he was a part of, because they reference meeting with Joe Biden to discuss things. Now, the lefty media is trying to say now there was no position in Biden's schedule that could have possibly accommodated for these meetings at the times they say they were a part of, and there's a problem with this, and that they immediately had to retract the statement because they said, well, we could have just not penciled it in on the schedule. That's a possibility.
Yeah, you really should have thought about that one beforehand.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah, this is all stuff that ultimately was an open secret because Biden is on video bragging about his ability to exert influence on the Ukrainian government.
yeah, and the Ukraine stuff looks really damning for making that solidified in the public conscious. And but we've already known it for years and nothing's happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, the media just didn't give it coverage. Think about how many times very fine people has been played compared on the mainstream media compared to the video where Joe Biden brags about how he was able to strong arm the Ukrainian government into sacking the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma.
Yeah. And so there's a whole lot of tomfoolery that goes on with these emails. I'm not going to get into the specifics of any email because honestly, I'm scared I sourced one that's a joke if I read them and quote them explicitly, because there's so many, and there has been a concerted disinformation campaign by the Democrats and, well, by Democrat agents that operate
Yeah,
independently in the public, that I am scared that quoting any of them will lead to me being caught out as quoting something that was one of the faked ones. But there
yeah.
were
There have been a number of them circulating.
yeah, and it's very hard to get a hold of them because they're so decentralized.
And also because the actual claims that seem to have some veracity to them are so ridiculous. Like the corruption is so sloppy and brazen that it seems like it can't possibly be real.
Yeah, and then we have the China connection. There have Breitbart dumped a big article about Biden having a connection with China. This email is giant. It's huge with their influences. It's like 3 pages long of poorly spaced text and spelling and grammar that is wonky, to say the least. And yeah, it's a pain to try and read through that. But it apparently includes Chinese elites meeting with Biden through Hunter setting up the meetings. Uh,
The correspondence seems to come from Hunter's business partner, but it is the email seems to make it very clear that the when you know pass all of the garbage that's in it that that it is very much the objective in contacting Hunter Biden is to gain political access and influence to the Obama administration. So it's not just Biden personally, although Biden's the one who's the focus of it, but the objective is Biden as vice president, not Joe Biden the person.
yeah. So this is blatant corruption and shows that if Joe Biden does get in office, assuming this is all true and Breitbart got legit information here, then he's compromised.
Oh, he's certainly compromised, but I think that the greater compromise is his mental state.
Yeah,
Like I don't think him being corrupt actually matters in the sense of what will actually happen if he becomes president, because if he actually becomes president, he will find himself displaced right quick. But this is a reason not to vote for him.
yes, he is incredibly compromised financially and but through political means. So possibly more nefarious pressures as well to work with the Chinese after these meetings, because you don't work with the Chinese and come out of that a okay.
No, they once they've got their hooks in, those hooks are in deep. That's why they've been involved in this concerted investment campaign in the in American business is because they want to have their hooks in America. And in fact, that very thing is what these meetings with Joe Biden were designed to arrange, the opportunity for lots and lots of money to be poured into America from China.
Yeah. So so those are the two substantive connections directly to Biden that make it look bad, and are actually, should be investigated. If we are investigating Trump over an innocuous phone call during that he probably makes he probably makes another type of every single day to various world leaders to Ukraine, and we are investigating him for Russia, surely we can investigate Biden over actual physical evidence connecting him to China.
Nah, why would we do that? He's the golden boy.
No, we can just waste millions in taxpayer dollars, my money, by the way, folks, to go out and get Biden cover for the Democrat Party and try and impeach Trump, though, because Russia.
Yeah. The, the normies have to catch on at some point. Surely this can only happen so many times before it's too ridiculous for people to just dismiss as, oh well, this is just political stuff. We all know that Orange Man bad. We don't need to worry about this, right?
I mean, every time something like this happens and the left gets caught on their BS, more normies wake up, and I see them, more normies waking up on the Donald or on Twitter or on wherever, but it just never seems to be enough to sway the general public opinion over towards the Democrats are just lying.
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of strange because I've sort of assumed that the population of every country it just assumes by default that their politicians are full of crap, but it seems like on the strangest things they just get given credit. I mean, we have the same thing here in New Zealand. Like nobody trusts the politicians except that they are willing to trust the politicians with all of their tax money
Yeah.
and with all of the public utilities, and they basically want socialism.
Yeah. So we have this whole mess that's come out, and the thing that makes me inclined to believe all of it, and while it is not a substantive thing that leads to believing all of it, is the fact that social media has totally lost their minds. I understand this is not a substantive reason to believe anything that's been presented, but you don't flip out this hard unless there's something you absolutely don't want getting out in this story. This was too hard, too fast.
I think that their problem with it is not that it is true, though. The problem is that they can't control it.
Yeah.
They don't have enough control to allow this to be out in the public space because there's no way to turn it to Biden's advantage yet.
Yeah.
The more recent batch of messages that have come out are more sort of sympathetic in a way. There are ones that make Joe Biden look good. There are ones that make Hunter Biden look good, and as soon as these ones started to drip out, if they are in fact real ones, I am not able to actually confirm that because a lot of the smaller leaks, the actual source is very hard to determine. But these more favorable ones, the message discipline on the left just broke down because you had a division amongst people saying, "Look, these tweets make Joe Biden look really good," and people saying, "No, wait, you can't say that because if you say that, you're also implying that the tweets have some sort of veracity to them, and we are trying to deny them absolutely. Haven't you heard?"
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so much misinformation and disinformation floating around out there that I think that even though they might not know whether or not it is legitimate information, it is the social media companies feel that it is simply in their best interests to avoid that information getting distributed in an uncontrolled fashion. They want to pass it and go through it before anything gets disseminated to the public.
Yeah. I think that's a rational read on it, but it does not help matters with how hard they went on it.
The thing is that they've got every reason to believe that it is true themselves because they don't think Biden is squeaky clean. In fact, they don't care if he's squeaky clean at all. And everybody knows that Hunter is a scumbag. There's nobody who thinks that Hunter is a Boy Scout. That's just not reasonable. But yeah, so they have reason to be suspicious, and this sort of arresting the story though, it really hasn't played well for them. They've just fallen hard into the Streisand effect. Everybody wants to know now what is so important that it can't be revealed to the public. There has to be protect the social media giants have to protect us. So Facebook takes it down, claiming it needs to be fact checked. Twitter takes it down, claiming that it is the link is hazardous to the users. Like
Yeah.
this is not it's not the actions of an honest actor, and I think that that's ultimately what comes out of it. That
Oh,
people see it as not the actions of an honest actor.
when you said squeaky clean, I happen to have on tap that Mr. Clean meme from yesterday that I sent you, and I've got that on the
Oh
screen.
right, yeah.
So sharing the memes. Okay, close that. But yeah. So let's talk about what Twitter and Facebook, YouTube, and everybody else has done, but mostly Twitter. Twitter has been the worst. Facebook's been pretty bad. Twitter has been the worst, and everybody else has followed usual, you know, mandate has been handed down. We must censor all of
Yeah.
the things.
For most people, it's like they'll make some excuse and they'll throttle things. They'll modify the way they present the information. They'll add notes to it saying it hasn't been confirmed. They're taking the soft option. But I feel like at this point, Twitter feels in for a penny, in for a pound, and they're just going full. We are in the tank for the Democrat Party, and we don't care who knows it.
Yeah, they went full retard with this one. So
Did the legal department get involved, or are they all paused as well?
they're
Because this
probably
seems really reckless.
they're really paused. I'm sure based on the Joe Rogan interview that they did, but yeah. Oh my goodness. So first, Facebook. Facebook made it so that you could not link to anything, and they demonetized the New York Post. Twitter made it so you can't link to this thing. It'll flag your account in their system, and if anybody reports you for linking it, they can ban your account. And or if they just decide that you are too prominent a person linking it, you can be banned, as we showed with KMac earlier. Now, they weren't the only ones. The the GOP Twitter, official Twitter, got the post removed, and they can't link it. So they just posted a screenshot of it, and that still got removed. They didn't ban the GOP though. The House Judiciary
As Project Veritas confirmed though that Twitter has actual people and not algorithms monitoring conservative accounts.
yeah. So next up, we had before that we had the House Judiciary Committee, and this was Ted Cruz's thing, going in and just posting a mirror of the article that was hosted on the House Judiciary Committee's website to just see if Twitter would ban that, because it's just too easy to bait them with that. Like he couldn't not do it, I guess. And so, of course, they banned that link as well. And I don't know if the House Judiciary Committee got a suspension on their account or not, but they got some kind of disciplinary action for it, I think. And we saw many prominent conservatives disappear off Twitter for being banned or just get banned for this. Anybody that was a prominent conservative that linked the New York Post thing got hit either with some kind of disciplinary action, got the post removed, or got the post censored, or were just outright suspended entirely. And it seems
I think that in a lot of the time now, I think that it's just Ted Cruz has been watching the way Trump acts, and he's learned the talent of giving someone enough rope to hang themselves with.
yeah. So he set them up to get the Judiciary Committee slammed and the GOP slammed, and that was a good play. So Twitter went so crazy during all of this that their website crashed for 45 minutes while they had to fix stuff in the algorithm because they were adjusting it on the fly as well, in addition to having the real life people working on it. And I am making the assumption that this is what caused the whole system to break for 45 minutes, because it wasn't a usual downtime kind of thing. It was emergency pull down, and didn't look like a pull down. It looked like it just bugged out, where nobody could see anything for 45 minutes.
Yeah, they've done this sort of thing before, and it's always traumatizing for the blue checks.
Yeah,
because they can't get their divine edicts out to the people, to the peons who need to hang on their every word, and they usually end up imploding in the process. But yeah, so I seem to recall, although I can't remember the content, that Twitter did issue a non-apology of some sort.
yeah. And then they immediately didn't follow the spirit of that non-apology by telling the New York Post they're not unbanned from Twitter. Oh, the Post got banned as well, by the way. They cannot post again until they remove all posts manually that link to the Hunter Biden articles.
Yeah, so that's a pretty blatant case of saying, well, you can only say the things that we want you to say, and anything else is verboten.
Yeah,
You're not. They're not fooling anybody at this point.
this is the most blatant evidence that they act as a publisher that I've ever seen in my life, and they
And
have.
that's why I asked earlier, how were their legal team not involved in this? Because it really does seem to me like you're just asking to lose your safe harbor status.
Yeah, this is going to get this got everybody riled up to go figure out what the heck these tools are doing. Um, and yeah, the biggest thing that we have right now, and because it's still just people are talking right now, but our boy Cruz did this. I'll put it on the screen. We have the United States Senate, the Foreign Relations, Commerce, Judiciary, Rules and Administration, Joint Economic Committee. So all of those committees have written a letter signed by Ted Cruz calling Jack Dorsey in to come and testify before the before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, and I'm fairly confident he's just not going to bother,
Yeah, he
because
does.
there's nothing that he can say that will not hang himself. Like, are you allowed to use stuff if you testify before the Senate? Is that allowed in a court of law? I have a funny feeling it's not. I don't remember exactly
If you
how it works.
voluntarily give the information during the hearing, it can be used.
Right,
Because it is words from your mouth sworn under oath. But you can during the hearing, if you even do show up, you are allowed to exercise your Fifth Amendment and not self-incriminate.
right.
So through various methods, you can plead the Fifth by either just keeping your mouth shut, deflecting, or giving half truths, and that's still okay.
Right. Because the reality is I can't think of anything that that Jack could say that would not be rope to hang himself with in court.
Yeah,
When if this ended up being a question of, do you have safe harbor status? Are you a platform? Are you a publisher? What rights should be extended to you when you're behaving this way? You're acting as an editor of content. So how can you claim that you're a platform? Like, I don't see a way out of this without losing status as a platform. That's the least that they could hope to suffer would be to lose their status as a safe harbor platform. More likely, if things went bad for them, they would end up having to worry about election tampering,
yeah, and
because
this
they are doing something which has a direct benefit, measurable benefit to one party over the other.
and this was a big part of Cruz's argument was this is election interference as well because they are contributing to the Biden campaign by giving them a non-monetary contribution by going out of their way to suppress any and all information that may make Biden look bad.
I mean, it's a proxy a proxy monetary contribution in terms of labor, because they are devoting the time of their moderators and engineers to managing the image of Joe Biden for the Democrat Party.
Yes, and this has been a very successfully argued, I think, point that Cruz and other Republicans have made regarding this. So yeah, and the reasoning behind their craziness was really dumb. It was they're preemptively censoring it so that they can debunk it before misinformation spreads. What?
Yeah, this is the thing is that, and it's a thing that I often forget, is that they do in fact really love the smell of their own farts, and it's hard for me to remember this sometimes, but they believe a lot of the stuff that they say. They believe that Joe Biden is just and deserving of the presidency. It's not. Not a joke to them. It's not a.
It's not a character, folks.
Yeah, they actually think that they are fighting on the side of justice and that anything is excusable in that pursuit. And so Joe Biden needs to be protected because he's the great hope against Orange Man, who they seem to be convinced is destroying the world. And I really don't understand how they arrive at that conclusion. Nobody has bothered to explain to me what the all of the lies and all of the destruction of the republic and all of the stuff that he's allegedly involved in. I don't know what constitutes all of that.
Yeah,
But
I catch Democrats out on this all the time. It's really easy. They'll go, "Oh, I'm just sick of his racism or his lies." I'm like, "Do you have a single instance of it you can tell me about? If it's that pervasive, surely you know one."
I could forgive them if of just, oh well, they've got a mild case of TDS if it was something like, well, he lied about his crowd numbers. Well, that's a pathetic lie because he usually is just exaggerating for effect, and it's usually by a trivial amount. But it's usually they can't even say that. Even that's too much for them to come up with.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's
they don't even go to the very fine people lie ever. Like they just got nothing. They just repeat the talking point.
yeah. I wonder if there are Democrat operatives who just look at this sort of behavior and wonder why they bother to try so hard to spread disinformation, when clearly all you need to do is supply a buzzword and everyone will follow it.
Yeah. So this has been a total clown show that has been very hard to follow, despite daily shows talking about it. Like every conservative commentator has had at least a few minutes of something to say about it, and
Yeah, I think I didn't follow up on the story, but I heard that even Clarence Thomas is starting to think, maybe it's time to rein these guys in.
yeah, like Clarence Thomas spoke like we need to talk about this and see what's going on here. And Clarence
Because
Thomas,
the
yeah,
reality is that these people now wield a disproportionate amount of power in society. This is very much like the situation with the telecommunications company. Like telecommunications companies, they had to be dismantled because they had monopolistic control over a form of communication, and that
yep.
allowed them to exert disproportionate power over the people in the country. And the social media has just gone the exact same way.
And this is even worse with social media because it's a natural monopoly. It is an industry that will, by its own nature, move itself towards being monopolistic. People all want to be on the same platform as their friends. They all want to be in the same place because of the way the nature of the beast. So it's going to get itself in a position where only one or two of these things exist at a time. And so
Yeah, and we see it happening in real time. The old ones die and are replaced by new ones. That's
yeah,
just the way it always is.
yeah, and the old ones when they die, they die. Like I think a few music bands and indie bands from around the U.S. use MySpace still, and that's about it.
Is that because you can have it play annoying music to you when you go to the site?
Yeah, I think it's because they can customize their pages more, and it just became a music place. But that's all I see linked to MySpace anymore, if I see it at all. But like, yeah, we just move on. Remember Zanga?
No.
Yeah, that was before MySpace. That was a personal
What,
blog.
wasn't there like there was like what was
LiveJournal.
Live Journal? That's the one. That's the one. I remember there was Live Journal things I used to visit. Mostly lists.
Yeah, like those are like people just move on and these things stay monopolistic. Whichever one is the current in social media is going to have total control over everything. So we need to have some kind of regulation here, which is something I'm very hesitant to say because unlike you, I'm
Yeah.
very libertarian.
Well, I hate government having regulation over business. Like the I I'm hesitant to unleash full libertarianism on a lot of things where they because there are a lot of things that leave the door open to Marxism and degeneracy and stuff like that. That if you give people certain particular freedoms that are just not used under normal circumstances, but are used by Marxists to distort society, like I'm fine with just taking those away. Sod it. I don't care no more. We've already seen society get destroyed several times. Let's just not let it happen again. That's where most of my authoritarianism lives. But when it comes to business, I really don't want any regulation beyond the point of, it's a crime to blackmail your employees into working themselves to death.
Yeah.
Like I don't mind labor standard laws, but within reason, of course. But I don't like the idea that a government should be able to basically run somebody else's business through regulation.
Yeah.
And I also don't like them being able to take a huge cut of that business's profits for the privilege of being effectively run by the government either. There is a lot of reasonable oversight that I think exists, which causes me to drift a bit closer to the center. But I think that most oversight that actually takes place tends to drift into what I think is unreasonable.
Yeah, and this is a case where it had to be sold to me because I like the idea of businesses that can just play the game by the rules of business, and as long as they're playing fair and playing in the rules that have been set down, that they shouldn't be touched. But
But that's it's like I said last time. Capitalism is an engine for harnessing human greed to the benefit of society, but greed is still a vice. It
yeah,
leads people to do vicious things because that's just the nature. That's the nature of trying to harness greed, is that you're putting yourself at the mercy of it
yeah,
ultimately. And there are people who will not play by the rules. They will not play by not necessarily the legal rules, but the rules that allow society to operate in a way that is beneficial to people. It's like the framers of your country's constitution said that the laws that they were laying down in that constitution, they were only suitable for governing a moral and Christian people.
yeah,
They're not suitable for anything else because those values are held in common by the people, and people know what it looks like when there's an infraction against those values, and they will rise up against it. Now that everything has been attempted to secularize and you're trying to run with that constitution in a moral vacuum, it just doesn't function. It doesn't work that way. Only when the people adhere to the values that allows the constitution to function does that constitution function. And the constitution is premised on the society that cares about right and wrong.
yeah. And I've always made provisos for Monopoly specifically. A, because the government has done it before and it's been very good for everybody when they do. And B, because monopolies are don't let the game be played. You can't play the game with a monopoly. If a monopoly exists, then there is no game to be played. They just win because they exist.
A monopoly is basically the business version of an evolutionary dead end. Like you can't advance from there. The only thing you can do is multiply and grow bloated. You
Yeah,
can't actually progress. You can't improve anything because there's no drive to do so. A monopoly strangulates everything. You aren't actually capable of benefiting your market anymore because at that point, when you have a monopoly, suddenly the only thing that tethers that business to fairness is the morality of the one person in charge of it. It is basically you end up subjecting your customers to the whims of a benevolent dictatorship, which is only benevolent as long as the dictator is benevolent.
yeah,
So, yeah, you ultimately any monopoly is exactly as legitimate and moral as the legitimacy and morality of the one person in charge for the length of time that they're in charge.
yeah.
So basically, you're just establishing a monarchy.
So, so antitrust has always been something that I support. The problem with the social media for me was always getting it through my thick head that they have a monopoly, you dum dum.
Yeah,
Because
that's the thing, is that it's the weirdness of the pseudo monopoly, which was brought in by the sort of ideological hothouse that is Silicon Valley.
yeah,
This is not something like this is, although the founders were very prescient about a lot of things, the idea that you can engineer this type of sort of insurgent ideology within your own borders simply by creating a local culture and then just letting it run out of control, and that managing to electronically sprawl across the rest of the nation, there's no way that they could have conceived of that. And it's amazing that the protections that they have had already put in place have worked as well as they have.
yeah. Like
And
back
it
in their
speaks
day,
well of their foresight. But the core of the problem is now something they couldn't imagine.
yeah,
You don't have to put a guy on a horse to spread an ideology anymore.
yeah. It was guys on horses and carrier pigeons back in their day. Like this is we're quite a bit past that. So, yeah, it's something that needs looking at, And I think this latest round of censorship, that is what the public should focus on, and what the law enforcement agencies should focus on is that the FBI had all this stuff beforehand. And if it's true, and they had it all since December 17th, 2019, in the middle of Ukraine impeachments, that is negligence of their duty at best and
Result of
outright
the
treason.
FBI.
Yeah,
I don't think that they serve a purpose. They haven't served a purpose since the 20s.
yeah.
Like, you don't need them anymore.
I think the FBI could be a useful tool if they don't become politicized, but there are several things in their nature of being a federal investigative agency that force them
The
to eventually
FBI
become
are
politicized.
all but physically bolted to the swamp.
Yeah,
Like you can't break them away from it. The FBI once upon a time had a reputation for being, hardworking, practical, and incorruptible. That was who they used to be. But it's like the monopoly situation. They are exactly as good as the people in charge, and no more and no less.
yeah, and
Well, those people are not in charge anymore.
yeah, what they have done, if they held onto this information, is yet another instance of outright treason, in my opinion. This is disgusting if they had this beforehand, and I don't see very many people talking about this because they could have put a stop to the waste of taxpayer money being wasted during the Ukraine stuff, which we also know led into the entirety of the Senate and the House being kept away from the COVID to get more information if they care about that, regardless of my opinions on the disease itself. And so it snuck up on him, and except it didn't sneak up on Trump because you can't stump the Trump, and he knew about this beforehand and stopped China from sending people over. But it could have opened them up to pay more attention to it. Like, there's a good argument for it that people don't really bring up, but it also just could have saved us money and time. It could have stopped a unjust smear with Ukraine if they'd shown this and let us call and question Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Now, unfortunately, we probably would have primaried our way into somebody way worse than Joe Biden, but take what you can. That the just thing to do would have been to reveal this stuff at that time.
Yeah, but it's been made abundantly clear that the FBI, they just wanted to get rid of Trump. They didn't like Trump. Trump's claims that he was going to drain the swamp, that just hit a little bit too close to home for them, I think, because they know that they're swamp monsters.
I think Trump is aware that his base is calling for a second term agenda of we don't care what else you do, just drain the swamp.
Yeah, get rid of all the corrupt people. I'm still a little bit concerned about like how will that all go down now that there's no, you know, second term to be concerned about. I don't know how things will shake down. I don't know whether he's just going to, stop pandering to his base, stop doing what this base wants because these can't get elected again, or whether he's going to go, it's time for both barrels, no more pussyfooting around. But
I
the little confidence I have in him is I think he does love his country.
yeah,
I think he really does.
if there is ever a president that loved America during a time when it is not popular to love America, it's Donald Trump. Like, that boy really, really likes America, and you can watch his most recent rally in Macon, Georgia, if you want more evidence of it. The dude was, even when there's infighting in his own political party, is sitting there playing cheerleader for everybody involved in that mess with Doug Collins and the girl and Kellyanne Loeffler. He's telling, I don't care which of you wins. You're both great people. You both love America, and because you love America, I'll make sure whichever one of you doesn't win still has a future helping make our country great again. Like, this guy is on fire for with his love for this country.
Yeah, and all I hear is he's a liar. He defies presidential norms, whatever the hell they are, and he's a racist, and he's a bigot, and he's a this, and he's a that, and like, what do any of those things have to do with the country?
It
Like
comes, yeah.
you're just throwing around a bunch of words. You're not bothering to support them with anything. What you're actually concerned about is your vision for what you want done, and he wasn't hired to do that.
Yeah,
That's
no.
not what That's not what the people who elected him want from him.
And they don't even know that they don't really want what they say. Every country in this world would, and the world itself would be better off if its leaders did not work for this grand globalist cabal, but instead worked for the betterment of the people within that country and fought tooth and nail to make sure that they were ahead. And
Yeah.
this second you have this globalist pandering garbage, you wind up with like Britain right now that has all of its problems. You have France still in open revolt, I think.
I don't think that that's going to stop anytime soon because nothing there has changed. And France has been in open revolt since pretty much the revolution. Like revolting is just what they do.
Yeah, you have
Whoever's in, all their leaders are gutless, so the people are constantly revolting.
you have
The last French leader that had any guts was Napoleon, and he was a flash in the pan.
yeah, and then you have Germany that's fallen apart under Merkel right now. You have all these other globalist type countries that have had globalist leaders just not and did not take a good enough look at their own people. When their
You
quality
see
of
that
life got bad enough, they rose up and said, "Stop it."
from the point of view of someone in New Zealand, it seems very strange to me and very frustrating in a lot of ways that the leader that everybody on the left seems to worship is Jacinda Ardern. I'm not quite sure why. The thing with Jacinda Ardern, though, is that, I don't think that she's an evil person, but she's definitely got fascistic tendencies because she thinks that her vision of New Zealand is the way New Zealand should be, and that there is nothing too transgressive to do to bring about that vision that is not worth doing. That's why she's willing to entertain radical enhancements to hate speech laws and that, because in her vision, that makes New Zealand a better place. I think that she loves the vision of New Zealand that she has. She thinks that that's the way things should be and everybody will be happier that way. And it makes her a tyrant.
Yeah,
And so she's the exact person that they think Trump is, but they worship her because she just happens to share their political ideology.
and you see this a lot with the left, right? They believe in this fantasy of their country that is not the actual country itself. Loving the country that you were born into for what it is, despite its foibles and faults and its history, and maybe even using that as a mark of pride that you've either moved past those things or were able to endure them, is something that they can't understand. They want this glorified vision of the country they live in that they've totally made up in their own heads and is just fiction. They don't care about the country they actually live in, and this seems to be a running
They've
thing with them.
convinced themselves. They've convinced themselves that patriotism is the same as blind nationalism. That a person who loves their country doesn't ever want it to change. That the person who loves their country doesn't want to make that country better. They just want it to be the same all the time.
Yeah,
They don't. It's because they don't understand love of country that they think nationalism is the same as patriotism. A patriot always wants the best for their country. They always want to will the good for their country. That things will improve for their country and their countrymen. They don't care who those countrymen are, so long as it gets better for their whole country and that they can hold their heads high. That they are a moral and good country that is going to support its people. That's and they hold to that view without adopting utopian notions that you can perfect people by force or by science or by experts or whatever,
yeah,
as opposed to the patriotism that the left thinks that patriots have, which is blind nationalism, the my country right or wrong point of view, where because it is your country that does it, that makes it right. And the reason that they think that is projection, because that's how they operate. They think that because they declare something to be right, because they think in a narrative way, the way that the narrative determines reality, if they think something to be right, it means it must be right because they're on the right side of history. So if they think something is right, if they think that they make a progressive change to their country, it's right because they say it is. They are progressives. They have made this change. The change advances them to the future, and everything that is in the future is better than everything in the past. Therefore, they have advanced. Therefore, things are better. They declare it by fiat
yeah. Right side of
because that's the
history
way they
makes my skin
operate.
crawl.
but but because that's the way that they operate, they project that on their opponents, on the people that they loathe. That there is just this sort of unilateral declaration of the way things should be that comes from the right that is uh, an undermining thing for a better future for the country.
Yeah, and
But they don't like they don't like their countries. Typically, progressives don't. They can only see the bad things in them. They can't see the good that can be brought out of it. They can only see things to tear apart, because ultimately they just live in a fantasy world in their imagination. They see that grand future, that perfect state that can never really exist. The A utopia is a utopia because it doesn't exist anywhere. That's why we have the word.
Yeah, it means no place. So,
So yeah, you can't live that way. You can't keep destroying your country in the hope that you can just roll the dice next time and things will come out better. And that's ultimately every single one of these people who is trying to tear down their nation in the West, they all think that it would be better if they personally were in charge.
yeah,
They're all just dictators in the making. They think that they're fighting fascism, but it's because they have a fascist vision that they want to deploy. And you can think of that as communism if you want, since they're all communists. But the differences are very subtle between the two, to the point it barely even matters. They'll never acknowledge that, since communists and fascists are bitter traditional enemies. But that's the way of things. This is the way of things. They just want to exert power, and so eventually the power becomes the ends.
yeah,
It's not just the means anymore, because they focused on it. They focused on it, absolutely focused on it, and so they need to control everything. They need to to sculpt the way people think, to prevent them thinking things that are wrong, because they need everybody to think like them in order to bring about their new world order. That dreaded phrase, the dreaded phrase that gets you labeled with conspiracy theorist, which
yeah,
is, that phrase has become a an incarnation of preemptive debunking,
yeah,
because all you need to do is say it, and that's it's the opposite of a virtue signal. It is you signaling to someone else that this person is to be cut down. This person is to be treated as irrelevant and crazy and dangerous.
yeah.
And you aren't allowed to think any more about it, because to do so would not be moral.
Like
You aren't allowed to consider what they think. That's dangerous.
I do call the QAnon folks Q-tards a lot because I think they take things too far. But I'm not going out of my way to say you shouldn't listen to what they have to say or give them a shot.
Well, the thing with Alex Jones is that he's crazy, man. He thinks up all kinds of things, but sometimes people put chemicals in the water and the frogs turn gay.
Yeah, I mean he is surprising right a surprising number of times on his conclusions of things, even if his path to getting there was a little wackadoodle. And I think there really was chemicals turning the frogs gay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes people put chemicals in the water and the frogs turn gay. And he's the only one who's really talking about. Well, actually, that's not true. There were lots of people. In fact, in my university, there were people who were investigating that phenomenon. Not to that specifically, but like feminization in fish species due to the leaching of agricultural chemicals in the water via bovine excretions. Like that's actually a field of study,
Yeah,
and everybody ridiculed Alex Jones because he expressed things in a, well, you could call it a Trumpian manner,
yeah,
but it was a thing. It's definitely a thing.
yeah. And there's a lot to be said for those types just existing, but it's more to the point of their language control. I think the conspiracy theorist has been taken to mean somebody that has crazy ideas or past to drawing a conclusion that involve groups and groups of people with high amounts of power to mean just anybody that has a theory of something or evidence that we don't like, and we're just going to call them a conspiracy theorist so that people don't pay any attention to it, even if it's we got the hard evidence right here.
Yeah,
We
the idea is that if you use that word, then people don't need to look at the evidence. They
Yeah,
are
it's a way to dismiss people's ideas.
pre-debunked.
Yeah, it's a way of saying no, this isn't important. This person's dumb. There's a conspiracy theorist. You don't got to pay any attention to them. Don't look at them at all because of its social connotations.
I did hear today, I think, that 4chan is currently doing an op. Poll is doing an op to try and address this whole preemptive debunking business,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're basically just preemptively debunking a bunch of random stuff and stuff that's sensitive for the left and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So
It's not hard to understand why the left has a special hatred for Pol. Is because they're such a force of chaos
They're,
that there's no way for them to ever exert control over them.
and they're a force of chaos that loves targeting the left because the left is so soft and so easy to get reactions out of. And
Yeah, I think that is partly that, but I think that they also they they like to just tweak the noses of people who have a high opinion of themselves generally. They like to throw the guy in the tuxedo down in the mud.
yeah, that's would
They're just
historically be in line with
iconoclasts
them.
generally.
Yeah, they're that group in every society that is heckling the people in power just because they're in power.
And that's why they're different to the antis.
Yeah. So, but that goes to a main show topic that y'all can check out on our main podcast if you'd like, which I'm hesitant to say the name of, even though the past few shows had the logo of it in the bottom right hand corner. This one does
Now, I
not.
don't. The other show is the one that I talk about to other people. Like I don't want to get in trouble. Like that sounds hypocritical of me, but I don't know the way my country is necessarily going to go over the next 3 years, and they keep floating hate speech laws. I don't actually want to go to jail, you know.
Oh yeah, if your country passes some of the hate speech laws that the left considers hateful, you are gone, and I'm gonna have to come play dueling banjos in a helicopter when I bust you out of
Like
jail.
I have a vested interest in Trump's victory because I need you guys to have a president who might be willing to grant me refugee status when my country goes over the edge. I hope that it doesn't because, well, basically, in short, we've had our general election. It happened the other day, and it was a massive, debilitating uh, landslide victory against the centre right by the centre left. And in MMP, it is extremely rare, and I don't know that it has ever happened in New Zealand history before since they brought in MMP, that one party can govern alone without forming any kind of coalition. And Labour won by that much that they should be able to do that unless something radically changes as they count the overseas votes as they roll in. Um, and largely the reason for that is that the centre right party lost its identity and fell apart. The centre right in New Zealand are basically the New Zealand equivalent of rhinos, so they are sort of they're about as far right as first term Obama. That's our centre right. um, and they had lost their identity. They basically they crumbled. They were strong under the leadership of John Key because John Key gave them a strong centre to rally around, and he had very clear ideas about what he wanted to do with the party. He wasn't a Trumpian figure in the way of being a loud personality, but he was a person who had made a huge amount of money by being cunning in business deals. So he had a clear vision for where he wanted the country to go and wanted to carry that out. With him gone, and he's one of the few politicians in New Zealand who has ever gone out on top as opposed to getting backstabbed. Um, the National Party, the centre right, didn't have any identity. They didn't have anyone to rally behind, and they've had umpteen changes of leadership over the past year because nobody seems to be able to do the job properly, and there's so many splinter factions are appearing within the party that nothing ever gets done. So there was no path to victory, no reasonable path to victory for the National Party, and the leader at the time of the election, Judith Collins, was a strong leader, but she's got a lot of enemies, like a lot of enemies, because she never minces her words, and that's a huge problem for a lot of people. Um, a lot of politicians, particularly, there are while there are a lot of people who would never vote for her because they think that she's too much of a thug. There are also a lot of people who like her, even if they don't want her to be prime minister, because sometimes you need someone to call a spade, or she would probably think of a more profane name for it. But so National got crushed, and I think the reason that National got crushed is that everybody on the centre right saw they had no path to victory, and all that they wanted, knowing that they couldn't win, was to ensure that the Greens did not have their hands on the reins of power, because the Greens have floated the capital gains tax and the wealth tax as tentpole policies for them being part of a government. And both of those would be very, very bad for anybody of even modest wealth. Because if you set up a wealth tax, which is as has been proposed, 10 cents on the dollar for every dollar of your assets above a million, number one, you're going to destroy the economy. And number two, because it's a Labour government, inflation is going to run away with itself, and that net will get spread broader and broader and broader and broader. So the centre right ensured that the centre left would have a crushing victory rather than risking a progressive government. And we've got 3 years of Jacinda at the helm to exert her no idea what she's doing on the country, which is better than a greenie who does have an idea of what they want to do. And in addition, she won't be able to blame anything of her COVID interventions on anybody else. She'll be standing alone at the top. So yeah, we've got a bit of a situation here. Unfortunately, she is New Zealand's priestess of woke. She's always trying to make things more woke, and she just imports ideas from the United States' woke contingent because they are viewed as sort of like the frontier thinking on wokeitude is the United States for whatever reason. And so we've got her intent to try and protect people's feelings. She's always about people's feelings. She's worried very much about people being kind to each other by her definition of kind, which means to behave the way she thinks is appropriate. And so she often does things unilaterally that people never asked for, such as basically firearms bans, which are her brainchild. I mean, there's lots of people have been calling for them for a long time, but she decided it was for the good of the country, and with no consultation of the people, just unilaterally decided that, we're going to confiscate firearms now. Because she's a miserable administrator, she was totally unsuccessful. And while it is now law, they managed to successfully confiscate like 1 in 3. But she also managed to do things like get laws on the books that allow you to no not raid somebody without a warrant, that sort of thing. We have the ability for the government to unilaterally spy on any citizen for any trivial reason they want. She's just a ideologue. She doesn't see any reason why she shouldn't just exert her will when she's prime minister. And I think she genuinely believes that she's being kind, because her manner every time she gives a press conference is that of a kindergarten teacher talking to kindergartners. Because when one says nanny state, she wants to be the nanny. She
Yeah.
thinks everybody needs to be taken care of by her, and she's the one who knows how. But yeah, the only advantage to that is that she won't have anybody to blame for her madness over the next 3 years, and she may in fact just get gun shy and sit tight and do nothing because she's afraid to move without somebody else to blame. But if she doesn't, things could get hairy here very, very quickly. If she gets a taste of at the top with no accountability, there's no, until in the past term she had a deputy prime minister of an opposing party because she formed a coalition with the chaos candidate Winston Peters. With that gone, there's nobody to put the handbrake on any longer. So either she will get gun shy and not act, do nothing, and lose the next election because she's let the country crumble out from under her thanks to her COVID interventions, or she'll get a taste of power and start to do something crazy. So that's why I'm so concerned about my current position. Is
Wait,
that
you're trying to
we're
get your butt over
gambling?
here.
Yeah, we're gambling on a centre-left party that will be a do-nothing and will suffer for it. But we may, in fact, get a far-left party that is going to radically revamp the face of New Zealand. And unfortunately, a lot of people have bought into Jacinda Mania, helped in no small part by the fact that New Zealanders are overly conscious of the country's standing in the eyes of others. But the way you determine your country's standing in the eyes of others, if you're a normie, is you look at what the media says about your country. And the American media also likes Jacinda.
Yeah, it is very clear female privilege with her, from what I've seen. She
Yeah, well,
just,
I mean, she's a 37. She was a 37-year-old prime minister whose qualification is a communications degree.
yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't sound like an enviable position. We would be in a different but in the same type of boat situation with Kamala, but thankfully we have states that can curtail anything that a crazy president would try to do with executive orders. and we have a Supreme Court that, in theory, is there to stop them from doing anything really out there.
Well, I mean, that's what your separation of powers is all about. That's the reason why you have it. But I think that you would be in a worse position if with President Kamala Harris, because basically because the United States is a target for ultra pro globalist types like the Bill Gateses and the Jeffrey Sachses and the George Soroses, those types of people. America is an important target for them. They view America as a threat to their ambitions and have said as much. They That's the thing with George Soros. People was talking about George Soros being the center of conspiracy theories and that, but he has never hesitated to tell people exactly what he wants and what he believes. He
Yeah.
knows that he's got a messiah complex and has acknowledged it in those words in the past. He knows that he wants one world government, and he's said as much in the past. But America is a target for them, both because it's a threat and because it would provide a very strong power base if they were able to see the ideology deeply in there. And the reason I think that Kamala would be very, very bad for you guys is because I think she would not hesitate to turn power over to them instantly.
Yeah.
She is too dumb to be president. She's too dumb and too cowardly. Her only talent is to get down on her knees.
She is the queen super spreader.
Like that's her skill set, and that skill set basically means that what's she going to do? She's going to find somebody else to do the hard work for her. It's how she built her career so far.
Yep.
And the people who are going to be standing waiting to fill that gap, they are going to be the ideologues like the Soroses. Like those people, those are the ones who are going to end up in charge. That's just what's going to happen. I think Biden would be safer than Kamala Harris, because at least Biden is convinced that he can be the president.
Well, Biden's brain's gonna fry out as soon as he gets into office. If Biden gets elected, he's gonna get into office. They aren't gonna have a reason to keep him dosed on amphetamines every day. His brain's gonna completely fry out, and that's gonna be all she wrote for Biden.
I mean, if they dose him up too much before the election, he's just going to have an aneurysm or something. He'll stroke out.
He's already had one. Like the dude already had one or two aneurysms in his life. The dude's not doing well.
Yeah, as much of a scumbag as he is, it's still elder abuse. Like his wife should be ashamed of herself. She's supposed to be taking care of him.
Yeah, like this is a dude that should be sitting on his porch having fun with his grandkids that he won't acknowledge because they're Hunter Bidens. and sitting out there living out his last days with his dog, reading what's going on in the news and watching some football or something. Like that is what Joe Biden should be doing. But no. Instead we got to try and prop him up to run him for presidency.
Yeah, he's an empty vessel to try and put in place a completely and intentionally gutless vice president as the president. I think that Kamala was picked for a reason. And I think that reason is not just her ethnicity, but the fact that she's too weak to lead.
Yeah, I think she was picked
other powers will be able to walk all over her.
I think if they dug hard enough, they could have found another black woman or just woman of color to fit Joe Biden's description that was not as stupid as Kamala Harris.
I don't think that they had the time. I think that their hubris got the better of them. They thought that their victory was a surefire thing. And then as Trump's popularity didn't wither the way they expected it to, they realized that actually we need a backup plan.
Yeah. So that's what we got. And I'm looking forward to the next few weeks to see where things go. Elections here, people can go and vote. November 3rd is the official poll day, and most offices are allowing people to take off for election day. So
it's law in New Zealand. Actually, I found out when I investigated that on polling day, the employer is obliged, if you have not voted yet and you're working on a polling day, that to let you leave work by 3 p.m. to go and vote, and you must be paid for the whole day.
So yeah, in most states, those of you that live in sane states like Georgia, myself, you can go out and vote early now. I recommend you vote early during early voting so that you don't have to wait in lines. I will be going this morning probably. I'll probably head out around just before 8 o'clock. It's 4:30 now, so in about 3.5 hours. And I'll vote then. It was open all last week too. I didn't want to go the first week of voting because I figured it would have, everybody wants to vote on the first week to get it done. But Yeah, you can vote all the way through November 3rd. Otherwise, mail-in ballots are out, and there's a whole lot of tomfoolery going on with that. But we just don't have time to talk about it right now because it's not. It's a breaking story that we don't have a whole lot of info on, and I'm excited to see what happens with the voting websites where you can request a ballot that cancels your old ballot and then print out another envelope and mail it in.
Yeah, it may be a breaking story now, but I have a funny feeling that by the week is out, it will have broken in a lot more places.
Yeah. So this is we're in for a ride, folks. It's let's see. We got the third is 2 weeks away plus a day. So we got 15 days to weather the storm. And of course, as with COVID, after those 15 days are up, it will continue afterwards because mail-in voting shenanigans. So
Yeah.
I don't want to say I'm excited. That's the wrong word. I'm alert and enjoying what I can of this mess.
Hey, one thing I've noticed though, nobody talks about riots anymore. Like this has been an extremely effective way, all of these things going on, to distract from the fact that that was ever happening.
Yeah, you got
Because they suddenly became politically obvious to the Democrats that it was politically disadvantageous to allow this to go
did
on.
they not expect them to be? Like what?
Evidently not.
Why were they? They did everything but grab some pom poms and put on skirts. They were
Yeah,
cheerleading these things.
I don't know if it's just the coverage that has ended or whether they've actually stopped.
I don't think they have
Like,
because I remember a story this week of them tearing down Abe Lincoln somewhere or something.
yeah, but it seems that the media aren't interested in them anymore, and the Democrats aren't interested in backing them up anymore.
So yeah, we got election time, folks. You all knew it would get bad, and the fun will continue until election day is over, and then even probably past it. We'll keep an eye on stuff that goes on, and if enough stuff happens that we get enough sources on, we'll do another show and talk about it. So, you got anything else for us to sign us off?
no, I think that's it for now. We've done enough yammering for one day, I think.
Yep. All right, folks. We will see y'all next week. Well, not next week. Next time we do a show. So you're saying that with the other show. We will see you next time we do this show. Sayonara. Bye bye.